And they are going to win here. Their first win of the year for the Bombers. And they conjure it up in the last quarter on the back of 4 straight goals.
Alrighty, hello and welcome to the CREEDCAST. My name's Dave, and as always, much appreciation to you for joining us, being here with us as we continue on this journey with the Port Adelaide Footy Club week in, week out. And apologies to you all. I titled last week's episode "So Fucking Back," and we are not so fucking back. Your Port Adelaide Footy Club may be carrying some similar hubris to the German war machine in June of 1941, when it broke the non-aggression pact with the Soviet Union, launching Operation Barbarossa into what was thought would be a short, swift, decisive German victory. But they came ill-prepared, under-equipped, were not ready for the colds of the Russian tundras when that Russian winter hit. Much like us, seemingly ill-prepared for the battle and conditions to come. Essendon, undermanned, but defended marvel like it was the siege of Stalingrad, ultimately grinding out victory and turning Port Adelaide back to Alberton. 9:18:72 to 8:12:60 was the final. Jamie, I've been feeling much like a German soldier whose dick's frozen off in the cold Russian plains, just waiting for the sweet, sweet relief of a Soviet bullet for the past 5 days. How has your recovery from that shit show been?
G'day everyone, happy Tuesday, and hello to you, Dave. How good is SA cricket right now, basically?
Yes, it's the Saka cast.
Yeah, that's exactly right. For those following the Creed on Twitter, we'll be well prepared for our 2-hour South Australian Cricket Association podcast. You're welcome.
Yeah.
No, but in all seriousness, to answer your question though, something like the Sheffield Shield victory over the weekend was definitely a sight for sore eyes. Myself watching the whole day's play on my phone and cured my woes to some extent. But yeah, it seems like so long ago that we played, because it was nearly a week ago. That much like most weeks, good or bad, you enjoy them when they're good, and when they're bad, if you're grown up about it, you just kind of try and move on with your life. Maybe an extra therapy session. But no, I'm looking forward to St Kilda now, but we got to do what we got to do. We got to discuss the Essendon game, which was a tough watch, to be honest. A tough watch, especially the longer the fourth quarter went.
Yeah, it was one of those ones that I think, and a few people on Twitter were probably saying in that third quarter, just fucking win this one. Like, it was such a turgid game, but it felt like it kept on feeling like we were going to get there, and then we just didn't. We wilted in that fourth quarter, and then it was like, oh, we've had to endure this shit game, and now we've had to lose it. Like, at least Essendon fans actually got that last quarter was really enjoyable. They were moving the ball well. There was that Sardell Hooley, him coming on as substitute and having that incredible run through the middle that kind of got them back into the game after we'd gotten ahead by 11 points, which is weird to think that we did try to make a breakaway again at the start of that fourth quarter, and then it just all went to shit after that. But one of the most turgid, horrible games of football you could ever watch. It was just sloppy. Surprised with some of the stats I see about disposal efficiency and stuff, because it just didn't feel like that kind of game. But, but it wasn't so much despite, once we had the ball, sometimes it was okay. It was just the trying to ground ball gets and all that kind of stuff was really, really horrible, and some bad kicking and whatnot here and there. But it was just it was so hard going back and watching bits of it in replay, trying to prepare for the podcast, because it was just reopening old wounds. Because as you said, it's so long ago now, 5 days ago, that I started, obviously, as you said, the Saka cricket kind of buoyed me, and but going back and preparing for this pod has been some rough watching. Before we get into the lines and stuff, my overall, I'm just frustrated and again, a lack of preparation. I'm starting to worry more and more about how we prepared for the season, but I don't know if that's what it is. It is, by the way, it was mentioned on one of the shows in the last couple of days just how hot it is under that Marvel roof when they shut it, and why are they shutting it?
And the longer it went throughout the game. There was like a layer of haze that started to develop. I don't know
Yeah.
if you noticed that in
I
the
didn't notice
telecast.
that,
There
but
was
no.
like, or if maybe like my eyes were glazing over a bit like my background for those on YouTube. Like, yeah.
Yeah.
But yeah, I swear, like, because it was obviously getting harder to handle the ball.
Hmm.
There's a lot of slipping, and then yeah, the players had a certain sheen to them. But I swear I noticed like a layer of haze developing under the lid there, and we spoke about it in the in last week's show
Hmm.
about what the go is with the marble roof, and it's just a flat, always keep it closed due to the possibilities of inclement weather, and more so for day games because of the contrast in shadow and light and the telecast being affected because of it. But I think over the weekend there was another coach who brought it up, and they're like, "Well, it's a night game, it's hot.
Hmm.
Surely that's the one kind of instance where you do make a change to that rule." And yeah, I guess then the AFL would be blamed for policy on the run again. But if I can just mention this quote, I listened to Kimbo and the Rooch on SNSA, or I listened to the podcast from yesterday, and Kim Dillon summed it up basically my sentiments according to the game. He mentioned that for 3 quarters, one side looked like they were playing for their lives but didn't know how to play.
Hmm.
And the other side looked like they knew what they wanted to do but couldn't execute to save themselves. The latter being Port Adelaide. And that's pretty much how I felt. Uh, yeah, it was a scrap. Essendon came to play. We looked off. Just those things, again, that we chatted about in the preview last week that were possibilities.
Hmm.
And, I expected a 30-point win if we're the team that we want to be, and they say that we are, and we expect to be. Uh, but that the only caveat was that we had to be on, and Essendon had to play like they did the week before. But to their credit, they came out with fire in their belly. But for the most part, I thought we managed them well in terms of keeping them at bay. But in chances after their first quarter kind of tirade at the start, for the next kind of 2.5 quarters, I thought we managed the pressure quite well. We just could not execute our forward movement the
Hmm.
way that we would want to or expect to. Uh, and that was the most frustrating part. Usually, over the last several years, if we get in a scrap, we're usually good enough to get our noses in front come the final siren. And this just didn't end up that way. So I guess that's part of the foreign feeling of it all, although disappointing loss is quote unquote all too familiar uh, under a Ken Hinkley regime. Yeah, it was just a scrap. Like I think you mentioned it before. Like I was just watching it, and while there was passages of the game I was really frustrated in because it was close, I was just like, "Oh, come on, just get it over and done with and win already." Like I tweeted on the night at 3/4 time, like it was a Rosie lifting, a Rosie and a JHF lifting in the last quarter, and that's all it realistically needed.
Hmm.
Unfortunately, though, JHF did lift. I'll give him credit in the last quarter. He's obviously again been under the microscope. And when he kicked that first goal early in the last quarter, I thought I was Nostradamus for a second. But
Hmm.
yeah, Rosie definitely had an off game, and he didn't lift. So in the end, we looked cooked. Essendon built up a head of steam, and they overran us. But as well as that, we're talking about 12 points. They had 8 rush behinds to our 3. So call it a +5 on rush behind. So we're talking about eight of their 18 behinds were rush behinds. They weren't actually genuine quote unquote shots at goal.
Although I guess
Logan
that
Evans
speaks to
turns it over.
some close to goal
Yeah, of
pressure though.
course.
Yeah.
They came close to goal. And
Mhm.
we were talking pre-recording about their forward half turnovers, which they maximized on, and
Mhm.
they covered us well in that statistic. But yeah, Logan Evans turns it over at the junction of 50 in the center square, direct goal. Like,
Yeah.
yeah, a couple of free kicks right in front of goal that didn't help, you know, and that's what I mean. And generally in those instances, we're the ones that find our noses in front at the end. But it didn't go that way, and it makes it all that more frustrating when you're grinding your teeth through 3/4 to 3.5 quarters, expecting to still get over the line, and then just going, oh, for fuck's sake, like, what the fuck happened there?
Yeah.
It's really frustrating, absolutely. And yeah, after 3 rounds, we're 1 and 2. So that's our lot in life until the next game, unfortunately.
Yeah, and it's a bit of like mentioning free kicks and turnovers at the point of 50 from Evans. It was one of those games where it really felt like a little bit of make your own luck, and we just played far too down.
Yeah, that's a good point.
Where we can be, whereas Essendon, for all there, and I'll mention it because it's funny. It's funny where different social medias and the different group people that pop up. There was a few people on Facebook that popped up and said I'm being harsh, and all that. It was just my caption to the full-time post, which was like, "We are fucking shite," which was objective truth at this moment in time. That was pretty shit. So, and we played well down to our standards, and some people were like, we've got all these injuries and short week and blah blah blah. I was like, Essendon had the exact same short week, have one of the more dire injury crises alongside us. Someone then replied and said, it's not as bad as ours, though, because the personnel aren't as important. I'm like, that's, some of those personnel from Essendon are pretty important as well.
Parish.
Yeah.
Yeah, for what? Yeah.
Archie Perkins, I think, was one of them. There's a few others. There's a long injury list of talented players, and they've brought in, and because someone else said, oh, we've had to have 3 debutants. I'm like, so have they. They've done that for the first time in 20 years as well. So it was like, it was a very even matchup as far as the situations both clubs find themselves in as far as injuries, blooding some new players, the short turnaround. Everything was set up for us. If we want to complain about those 3 things, we weren't playing a team like Adelaide who have, Adelaide fans are out there saying it's nice to finally have some luck on our side, although they had an injury over the weekend. We were playing a side.
Like health-wise, yeah.
We were playing a side that in very, we'd gotten the luck of the draw of playing a side in a similar, if you want to look at it that way, they were in a similar place. So those are not excuses to me. And, we just did play down. We didn't play. And I think there's some stats bear it out. I mean, we'll get into the lines, but it's just as a general thing, we were minus 29 in contested. And across the first 3 weeks of the season, we're 18th in the league in contested possessions, 18th in contested marks, 18th in tackles. Those 3 are just some key pillars, along with 16th in centre clearances and 15th in stoppage clearances, where a lot of the key pillars of the game that we should be better in and have the personnel to be better in, we're down on. And 2 of our 3 opponents have been objectively teams we should be beating. One of them we did beat in Richmond. Essendon was a team that we looked at in our preview of the season and said we should be beating this team. And to be fair, the night played out in a way that we could have beaten them right up until the last couple of minutes. By the way, really frustrated. Willie Rioli and Jason Horne-Francis taking way too much time with those shots on goal.
With those shots, just
when Willie miss anyway, because we praised him last year against Hawthorn.
Well, he just got on with it, didn't he?
Yeah, and this one he just took way too much time.
It kind of, I obviously rewatched it. Yeah. And then we were fucked. Like, there was, less than a minute. I thought the same thing because I rewatched it earlier today, and after the fact, it kind of told me that perhaps he was really, really gassed.
Yeah.
Because obviously spent a bit of time in the midfield last 2 games. So not even that quick snap goal that got us back in the game versus Hawthorn last year in the minor round. Because I was thinking the same thing. Minute and a half. There's a lot less time than we had last year. I mean, sorry, a lot more time than we had against Hawthorn in that match. Yeah. So, and that's exactly right. I had the same thought. And look, I felt it on the night, and I'm sure a lot of our listeners and viewers would have thought the same thing. There was about 15 minutes left in the 4th quarter, and that's when it felt that we were trying to protect the game from, while being maybe even less than a goal up, without checking the score worm. And they
got back into it pretty quick because Horne-Francis got us ahead within a minute, and I think that Saad El Houli run that I can't remember actually who finishes off that Essendon goal, but I think that was like 2 minutes later. So with 17 minutes to go, I think we were only up by 5 points. So there was a fair bit of time to go, as you said, to be trying to protect the lead rather than...
Yeah. And then So that was JHF was at the 1 minute and 15 mark. Nick Martin, who was the beneficiary of Sardell Hooley, 3:30, and then Redmond 5 minutes after that, which was the turnover of Logan Evans.
And at that point, it felt like a wave of momentum.
Yeah,
and bad vibes for us. Good vibes for them, but yeah.
One thing I will note though is that Nate Caddy at the 15 and a half, nearly 16-minute mark of that quarter, quote unquote, marked the ball. It got spoiled out of his hand by Aliir, but the umpire still paid the mark. Very close to goal. This is a bit of an apologist note. Kicked the goal, gave Aliir a bit, even though I thought Aliir fucking played him perfectly well for the whole game. Just a bit of useful bravado.
There was Nate Caddy said after the game, he actually said, because he got interviewed, I can't remember, I was flipped between Seven and Fox. I can't remember who I was watching at the time. It was probably Seven because I think they have more of the rights to it. But like Nate Caddy said, I actually respected Lear a lot. So it was a little bit of just, in the moment, like because they talked to him after the game and they said, oh, you got into him a bit. He's like, yeah, I feel bad about that. So it just shows.
I have heard him speak and I would believe those sentiments. He actually seems like a very excitable prospect for Essendon fans, to be honest.
And he was the one that, the moment with Nick Revolt, I think it was him as like there's been on socials a bit about him saying like, oh, I need to talk to, like he actually wanted to talk to him about
he like asked for his number or something, wasn't it? Yeah. I need to get you so look, did he have enough of the ball? Did he not before it was spoiled out of his hands? That's in the eye of the beholder.
Mm-hmm.
The point on the flip side of that is, what was it? Several minutes later, Travis Boak had the exact same mark spoiled out of his hands in a very similar way, called to play on, and that's what eventuated in the Draper goal, which got them 2 goals up, and they just sat on that lead for the rest of the quarter. So this is what I mean. Like, AFL is played in chaos. Australian rules football at the best of times is played in chaos, and those are the small margins that you're dealing with sometimes. And while it was a frustrating game, like we saw it last year versus St Kilda after the whole Brisbane turmoil game, you get yourself in a scrap, and sometimes it's a snatch and grab job. You just need to fucking just do it and get out of there. But a game of inches, which was filled and riddled with skill errors, unacceptable skill errors, and over possession, which is another thing that we were wary of coming into the season with the game plan. And we're 3 rounds in. How long does it take to learn a new game plan? We haven't had to learn a new game plan for, how long was Charlie Dixon at Port Adelaide, essentially?
His first season was in, speaking of those watching on YouTube, there's a lot of throwback lightning, electricity, Guernsey in the backgrounds of our stuff here. I think Dixon's first game for Port was, if I'm remembering correctly, 2017 against St Kilda at home, when we wore the throwback to our first away clash strip, like the one, I'm trying to describe it, but you guys will know the one.
It's like a black background with the
like
kind of strikes.
Yeah. I think that was Dixon's first game for us, so that was 2017. Did he come in 2016? I'm trying now. I thought I've always had that.
I think his first season was 2016.
It might have been.
And obviously 2017 stands out because he had a fantastic year that year, and unfortunately didn't kick accurately in that elimination final. And funnily enough, in those dying stages of the second half of that last quarter, it's a Charlie Dixon type that you need when you're flat out of petrol and you need a get out kick down the line. Because we're like Essendon, to their credit, and as we discussed pre-recording, their forward half pressure game was a lot better than ours. It seems that we've kind of lost a bit of that, whether it be due to structural change or the game plan change as a whole. Our forward half pressure game is just hasn't been there for the first 3 rounds, essentially. Richmond, obviously, are Richmond, so we don't have Charlie Dixon, and that's where that injury list and having a Lord type is sorely missed. Although they picked 2 rucks, and I would imagine they went into that game hoping that Soldo could last the whole game for a get-out kick late in the fourth quarter or whatever it may be. But unfortunately, it didn't work out. It was an error, in my opinion, picking the two rucks. They obviously did it because Essendon are running with two rucks, but they're obviously one behemoth in Draper and the other one's a bit more of a up-and-coming athletic type. So, yeah. I in hindsight, you probably sold off at halftime and get Cochrane involved a bit earlier before Essendon and their fans really had a head of steam.
Yeah.
But it's all in hindsight now, isn't it?
Yeah. I was going to make a point of that at some point. Maybe I'll just make that now before we get into maybe talking, because I know we'll start talking about more stuff as we get into the line, like going through the lines. But it's really feeling for Cochrane in the fact that he only, got on the field in the last quarter, and it just felt like the whole game was going in the complete opposite direction of what he did get that chance, and with a really, really nice shot from the boundary that just shave of the
goalpost.
Yeah,
is there 6 points away from us chopping that margin down a little bit. Yeah.
So a really nice mark and shot for goal, even though it missed. But yeah, overall he just didn't get much of a chance to show what he can do, because the game was just the momentum of it was all going the other way, and it's unfortunate, and so many players are out on their feet. Hearing that, it's funny, you just hear terms that you suddenly know of, but you suddenly hear just repeatedly in a weekend of footy. And I heard commentators saying players are out there tonguing a lot this weekend.
Yeah, like a dog.
yeah. And we were the ones tonguing in that last quarter. And so Cochrane kind of comes on with fresh legs, but everyone else is just like, we're fucked. So, that's a very binary way of looking at it. That's kind of how it, just in my mind, how I was just like, this kid's come on ready to go, and the game's not going the way at all that can benefit what he can do. And provide in that forward half, and even if he can get up the field a little bit, it wasn't going that way at all. So disappointing for him. Soldo, I think, because was it Power Pepper? I don't know. He went down with a head HIA at halftime. I wonder if they would have made the substitution at halftime had they not been dealing with a potential head injury situation, because that was my thought, I think, and a lot of people on Twitter and the socials were saying, sub this guy out, Soldo just looked a shell of a player that we admittedly didn't get to see much of in portcolours, but we were certainly buoyed by kind of his confidence and just how he moved. Like, he just looked, couldn't find game speed. Like his ball reading was
straight
off.
Up,
always in the middle of the.
Here's my watch. We're not even in the lines.
We can kind of talk about the forward line now too, and start getting into the lines if you want, because
I'm happy with that,
and we can talk about Soldo a little bit, because that's kind of floated
where he was kind of plugged. As that decoy for Georgiadis, which much like Soldo's game. So I thought Soldo objectively started well. In my opinion, his first quarter was probably his best. His second quarter was okay, but he just absolutely fell out of the game. And like you mentioned, it just didn't have the speed of the game. It reminded me of Scott Lysett being back out on the field again. You're really only there to try and bash up a ruckman. And like Draper, in the ruck contest that he did with Draper, I thought Draper still performed well against him anyway. And that's above being a decoy or a tooled option to bring the ball to ground up forward. That didn't it didn't really come to the fore, unfortunately. And it's alarming in his regard, because we clearly work better with Sweet. And I thought Sweet performed admirably again. He's going for a few gallops and whatnot, and that's obviously moving into the midfield side of things. But just making a comparison against Soldo, I think we know where we are. Unless his body has a huge turnaround, because I do think it is largely affected by the injuries to his legs. And again, we've mentioned it with other people, like Charlie Dixon, for example. Like, the more leg injuries you get, there's a lot of weight. The average person has a lot of weight and pressure going through their legs, let alone someone clicking over 100 kilos. So
Mm-hmm.
it would have to be a huge turnaround for him, particularly in conjunction with our game style, for him to come into consideration again for mine. And I was an advocate for Finlayson because I thought a Lukosius for Finlayson just made absolute sense. Again, Finlayson can double up in the ruck as well and is crafty with the ball. I've heard that perhaps the coaching staff and the selection committee weren't too happy with Finlayson's demeanour in the SNFL trial match, perhaps.
Mm-hmm.
But again, that's rumour mill shit. I don't know if there's any substance to that whatsoever, but it just doesn't make sense that, to me, that he wasn't plugged in there, because George started like a house on fire, but sorely needed just a counterpart in that, a tall counterpart that actually had some forward craft about him as the game wore on, and as Essendon were pushing their numbers back to negate Georgiades' influence, which worked in their favour.
Because Essendon, because as you said, Georgiades started like house on fire. It was disappointing that he didn't get the he kicked the 2 goals.
He didn't get the return that he deserved.
Yeah, he missed a couple, and then just
that he worked for.
Yeah, and he just didn't get many chances after that. And I think to your point about Finlayson, or just having someone with a little bit more athleticism and nous and size down forward, because Essendon were able to go, Mackay was beaten early, so a move, I think it was Ridley went down
Ridley.
there. And who they tried 3 different, was it Reed as well?
Yeah, it was Mackay, Ridley, and then Zach Reed.
Yeah, so they tried 3 different guys and just kind of disrupted it enough. And they had the freedom to do that because they knew there wasn't anyone else that they needed to be truly accountable for, as far as a big forward that's going to threaten to,
particularly when Rioli's roaming in the middle of the ground.
Yeah.
The other person that has a bit of fear factor, as we've mentioned several times before. Yeah.
And then we just weren't getting much out of anyone else down there, certainly, whether it be HORNE-FRANCIS, and it was as much to do with the entry coming in, which just wasn't great either. But yeah, it's just they were able to they had the freedom to switch a few magnets, and create it did so well, and were proactive. To give Essendon credit, were proactive in how they tried to handle any of our threats down forward. And they probably did look at it and go, "Oh, look, we're lucky they don't have a Todd Marshall available, or an Ollie Lord available, or obviously Jack Lukosius." Like they benefited from our injuries in that sense. But you only play who's in front of you, and they played the situation that they hand they were dealt perfectly. And
like George,
because he was threatened to turn, it was.
That's what I was. That's exactly the word I was going to use. Yeah, he looked like it was George. I mean, it did look early George or nothing. Like he looked like he was going to tear the game apart. And I'm looking at him, and his shoulders are a bit broader, his arms are a bit thicker, his trunk looks a bit more solid. Like he's obviously, and this is a guy that's still 23, I might add. So it just looked like he was going to be the absolute shining light, and I had him pegged for 4 goals. Funnily enough, he had 5 shots on goal, and 1 didn't even register a score in his name. Yeah, it just looked like he was absolutely going to tear it apart. A real shining light. And one thing that I noticed in his goal kicking routine is he, because they've obviously put a focus on everyone having their own routine, a bit like a bowling run up, for those cricketers, to go back to the cricket angle, which I really want to discuss.
For all the time in the nets, I never figured out a good bowling run up for myself.
Yeah. Hey, it's important. It's important, of course, to carry your momentum through. But at the start of his routine, I noticed, and I was tossing up whether to bring it up, but it's flimsy. It's just anecdotal thing. But
that's what
you'll notice that at the start of his run up, he smiles. And I think I've mentioned it on this podcast before, but I used to do a fair bit of running about 4, 5, 6 years ago. And partway through, any runner listening would know, you obviously hit a wall. In any distance running, you hit a wall, and it's part of the mental challenge of overcoming that. And then you get your first win, and you can get a second win, and depending on how long you're running. But one thing that I found was that if I started to smile or laugh that would help me get my first win. And it just changes your brain chemistry to look at the situation you're in a bit differently. And it's something that I noticed that he does at the start of his goal kicking run up. Now, unfortunately, I was like writing that down. I was like, oh, yeah, cool. That's very helpful. Changing his psyche, you know, being confident after the 2 goals that he kicked. And then unfortunately, he kicked 2 goals and I was like, damn it, the smiling is not backing me up in my anecdotal evidence right now. But I still am a huge believer in it. I think it definitely, from a running point of view, which is all I have to go off of, it definitely helps change your mindset when, you know, you're maybe starting to develop a stitch and you're hitting that kind of wall. But yeah, again, just a silly note that I wrote down while I was watching it. Again, to on the flip side, George kicking 2 goals 2 or 2 goals 3, if you will, in terms of missed chances. You'd usually peg him to reverse that, and that's another goal on our tally. And again, the snatch and grab nature of what we needed it to be, you know, like a George kicking 4 goals, that levels of scores. Just again, chaos.
Yeah. It was one of those games that was really screaming out for HORNE-FRANCIS to, while he spent some time down forward, to actually take over like we have seen him do down forward, which is an interesting I'm glad you brought up that anecdote about the smiling and the mental side of it, because it has been a question this week in the media, and whether I think Jason HORNE-FRANCIS is just a young man like the punching down on Harley Reid at the moment. I think there's far too much made about 20-year-olds and their body language on a football field. If they're still carrying her on like that when they're 25, 26, then I'll start having some issues. But as far as what we want out of Jason HORNE-FRANCIS at the moment, it was a little bit frustrating. He still threatened to tear the game. Like, that's just how good he is. He again was down by what I want out of him, but he still had an incredible highlight moment and showed just why we love him and have no problems with the fact that he's going to be a part of our side for the next decade.
Yeah, absolutely.
It was like you mentioning smiling and kind of that mental side of how you deal with things. It is, I think, HORNE-FRANCIS is frustrated out there, and he needs to find a way mentally to push through that. And again, we're asking a 20-year-old who's still developing, or 21-year-old still developing and figuring things out in life and football, and that's we're very cognizant of that. And again, side note, loved the West Coast Eagles fans 9-minute mark fucking middle finger.
Yeah, they really got around that, didn't they?
I was listening to it on Triple M on the way home from work. So Triple M were all about it. Like, they were like, we're not, you know, they're getting into administration, like, to get him getting up there, and they're like, we're not affiliated, we don't care, we're not going to get in trouble. Like, let's get around it. Look at him go. So yeah, I was listening, and then I obviously looked it up when I got home, and I was like, they actually did it. It was great. So
yeah, they did.
And yeah, like, we shouldn't be. We can have constructive criticism about what a player's doing in the field, and certainly what Harley Reid's having a down, like maybe, you know, sophomore slump or second year blues, whatever you want to call it, and same with where HORNE-FRANCIS is at the moment, just a little bit of body language stuff. But it is just, let's just talk about it as to what it is rather than make it bigger than it is. And I think HORNE-FRANCIS just having a start to the year that is somewhat symptomatic of where Port are at. And that's where I'm more concerned about, is like, it's symptomatic of that. And I don't have too much problems with what Jason HORNE-FRANCIS is going to provide us. But this game was begging for him and Rosie to take over and I know we're still talking about the forward line. We can finish off on the forward line in a moment. I'd like to ask what you think about a few of the other ones down there. But yeah, I just think HORNE-FRANCIS, this was the kind of game that we really needed HORNE-FRANCIS to show that forward capability that we've seen, the marking forward that he can be, the big targeting, muscling out backman forwards. And like this, I think the Essendon backline did play okay, considering the pressure that was on them. It still was a game that HORNE-FRANCIS could have more of an impact than he did down forward, which is disappointing, but just don't think we gave the opportunity to him either. So that's like,
it just seems to be spilling marks,
a couple of
handballs.
Everyone did
whatnot.
So that's why I can't even into that either. Like, if he was just him, but like Pau Pepper had some handling issues. There was a few other players that just spilled marks that he should take.
Well, I was going to say, the very last, I think our very last foray forward in the third quarter kind of summed up a little bit of what you're saying. And that's when Sam Pau Pepper was having a run down the wing, kicked it beautifully to JHF, who was out the back of his defender, about 45 meters out from goal, and spilt it, and then fought for it on the ground, handed it back to Sam Pau Pepper, who then proceeded to spill it over the boundary, and that just kind of summed it up.
I just remembered. That was the moment, and I like generally. I'm watching at home on my own on Thursday night, and that's the moment. Like usually when I'm watching on my own, I'm pretty quiet. Like I'll internalize a lot. Like I'm in my 30s. Like I just don't get outwardly angry, but that one moment was when I actually just went, for fuck's sake, like, and my windows are open.
Yeah, just take it. Yeah,
I know I knew my neighbors were outside in the front yard having drinks, so they probably heard just this random, for fuck's sake, from like just spill out of the windows. So like,
the whole of Anguston heard you.
Yeah, just rattled through the valley. Like they're like, the Penrice Quarry's like using explosives a little bit late tonight. Like,
yeah, and when you consider that Essendon kicked a goal late in the second quarter, like, we
one of those games where timing, everything was just timed horribly for us. Like we'd try to make it, they just get their momentum back at the perfect times.
So I mean, and that's another thing. Like JHF, he ended up with 2 shots on goal. Sorry, you take that. I can't remember what we were at that point in time in the third quarter. What were we, a few points up by that stage, because Essendon kind of pegged it back a little bit. You put that back out to the 9-point region, and you go into the last quarter a little bit different, but it just gets spilt over. Just for the people, I like what you said about JHF being a symptom of where we're at the moment, because I think that's a fairly apt assessment. I think him being a number 1 draft pick is taking a bit of heat off of Rosie for this particular game, but I've also heard that Rosie's first 2 games were fucking excellent. So does he get a mulligan in that regard?
I've got more worries about where HORNE-FRANCIS is at for this current season. Again, no worries about HORNE-FRANCIS going forward as far as a long-term Port Adelaide player. Like absolutely zero concerns there. Just for this season currently, it's just like gotten away from him so far. And whereas Rosie was the leading player in the comp for the first 2 weeks as far as disposals and
disposals. So if I can offer a little bit of hope in regards to JHF for people listening and viewing. Thanks everyone for doing so, by the way, whatever your proclivities are. Ground ball gets, JHF had 6, which is second to Ollie Wines with 9. And then JHF ended up with 8 score involvements, which was second for Port. This is also to Ollie Wines. JHF ended up with 6 clearances, which was our sorry, I've clicked the wrong tab. It was our best. So everything that you've just said and that we've discussed, I think is 100% true. Much like everything in football and AFL football, it's never as bad as it seems, and obviously never as good as it seems. So those are some kind of effort-based stats and team contributions in terms of score involvements as well. There's still some key indicators which would suggest that he's going to break through the funk. It's just the whole team needs to get on the same page. And look, I think for those people on Facebook, and if any of you are listening, thank you again. It all goes into the melting pot. Yes, injuries. Yes, game plan change. But at the end of the day, if you're moving the ball forward, as well as we were from the defensive half to our half forward line, you've got to finish it off. Like we had so many great opportunities to finish off our work, squandered. And sure, Essendon could probably feel the same way about some of their forays forward, but we're looking at it from our point of view, and we just didn't capitalize. Like I mentioned, for the best part of 3 quarters, I was frustrated at how close it was, but I was just like, oh, we'll still just get over the line.
We'll figure this thing out.
Marvel's our second home, and it's what we generally do in a close game. It all just adds to the frustration, and the pitfalls of it. And of course, yeah, the Crows won, so that doesn't help in our corner of the world either.
Yeah, yeah. We're now like 2 games back of them if we're looking at the local ladder, so to speak. I
It's
can't.
not unfamiliar territory,
did you
though.
mention the other one? I can't remember. When you were going through HORNE-FRANCIS stats, his contested possessions as well. If you did, I just missed it. But
I didn't. I actually didn't mention that.
yeah,
So yeah,
second to Ollie Wines with 10 contested possessions
with
as well.
10.
So like,
yeah,
just to add to you, because I was just looking at him as you were mentioning him, I was just like, did I miss it? Or but that adds to your idea that he is he's hitting some of those KPIs, so to speak. It's just like he just there's a little
it's the
bit,
whole package.
yeah. And again, it was his body language is kind of symptomatic of a lot of players out there just looking a little bit, just that 1% off. And that's all it takes.
Yeah, that's all it takes.
In some of the discussions around the succession plan and the mentality that goes with the subconscious mentality that could be going with that, and I'm okay with the media having that discussion because we're putting the poor performances on the table to bring those discussions up. Some of them just are a little bit sensationalist still, but I think it was David King back in round 1 after the Collingwood game said, "What does that 1% of doubt in your mind do because teams need complete buy-in to win a premiership, and that the Port don't look like a team." And the evidence of this game to me is a team that just is a little bit, the buy-in might not be the synergy the buy-in and synergy isn't quite there. And whether that is because, one of Ken Hinkley's strength has been, battening down the hatches, getting everyone close knit and backs against the wall kind of stuff. And when this kind of thing is happening, whether that has just broken through that a little bit, who knows? But we've only got these 3 weeks to go off so far. And again, I'm not going to get too into the weeds of what we should do going forward this year until, and the club has said we're not going to.
I mean, that's exactly right. Yeah. It was still within that first 6 rounds that I give myself before I get really frustrated. And I remember sitting with you around this time last year after a loss to Melbourne at home with similar vibes, and some of the stats that we haven't even gone over. You go, oh, well, we won this, and this, and not a lot, to be honest, but Melbourne was probably more weighted towards us, but we go, oh, for fuck's sake, like another one of these losses. And how's the season going to shape up? And we obviously finished second. The year before, we had one of these losses to a greater effect in the showdown early in the season. And that was the untenable
one
moment where we ended up, going on that massive streak. So, while frustrating all the same, we're still in a period where we just wait and see.
Yeah. And I know some people won't like it, but it's just like what the alternative now is. And then some people are like, we need Carr gone already now as well, which is just like.
Well, and I think he is, like, for all intents and purposes, like, and they may not come out and say it, but if you don't think Carr is taking over more responsibilities at the club behind closed doors, I think you're kidding yourself. Like,
no, I think that what I was saying is like some people are now saying they want Carr gone already.
Oh, I want Carr gone. Yeah.
It's just ridiculous. Like we need.
But if he went to Richmond, was it last year or the year before? It would have just been another person that those same people would go, oh, well, we could have had Carr.
Yeah.
We could have had Kingsley.
12 months
ago.
12 months ago, I was like, oh, we could have had Voss, and now it's just like Voss is
dirt.
The seasons change quickly in footy. Moving to the midfield, which I think is kind of like, and defense will be fun to talk about too, because I actually think there's some people that did pretty well down there considering. But midfield is kind of where the most intrigue is. I mentioned some of those stats earlier about like we'll get to some of the individuals, and there's some good performances as well, but just there was a lot of people down on the night, unfortunately, and like that's what like kind of was said. I think like Lee and Co as well, is just like we had too many people down, and again that's just like I don't know what like preparation goes into that, but there's a lot of players, and in particular some of the ones that we usually defend to the hilt, like Rosie, was down, still led the pressure acts, but
I saw that. I don't actually see the pressure acts until pre-recording of when we jump on to do this.
It is
I'm
one of the
sorry.
last things I look at. I go, oh, I was like, because I looked
Yeah,
today, I was like,
yeah.
I don't think he'll be up there this week, and then lo and behold, he's still there. Like,
Well, and I'm pretty sure we had one smother for the whole game, and I'm pretty sure it was kind of rosy as well.
was that one out in the wing or something like that? Like,
It was like a forward pocket, I think.
okay, yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, I did notice when pre jumping on with you.
Yeah. But clearances again, like we think this team is a decent side as far as the midfield, even with Butters out.
Yeah.
We're just not winning clearance battles well enough, and you know, we kind of were like, okay, like in the first couple of weeks, I'm trying to scroll through keep missing where I have my clearance numbers. Yeah, like we shaded the center clearances, but just got beaten. Got beaten on the stoppage. Like, we should be better than an Essendon team. Again, I'm not trying to punch down an Essendon, and
No, I completely agree. I mean, yeah,
about.
I predicted a 5-goal win.
Yeah.
So yeah,
this is what the effort and intent thing we were talking about is like that can make up for a lot of the perceived gaps on paper is like effort and intent. I just don't. Again, it's another area we just didn't bring it well enough, and we were a bit reactive. Essendon hunted the ball really well. The contested possession numbers, like minus 29 contested, is just horrifically bad against the team that is.
Yeah, not even to crack 100 is
yeah, and again,
rough going.
Was that the one of the stats? Let me just scroll down quickly.
Yeah,
we're last in the league in contested ball at the moment. So that's an indictment on a team that has a lot of players that like to pride themselves on tough. Like whether you're talking about Willem Drew or Ollie Wines, and none of them were. I think Ollie was actually okay on the night.
I think Ollie's probably the only one who can hold his head up high.
Yeah,
in that regard.
As
hard as it is for me to say that, yeah, our man Willem got a bit lost amongst the weeds a little bit, I thought, and it just seemed like he didn't have a really determined role on the night. In the end,
you just
considering Zach Merritt got off the chain from a possession point of view, Zach Merritt's disposal is another topic. And how much it hurt, but yeah. Unfortunately, Willem had a down game, and just like Ken said, just like you mentioned before, there was too many of that bracket in terms of leadership that were just 1 to 5% off as a collective, and it makes a huge difference. You've got to rely on first, second, third gamers, sub 22-year-olds to win you the game.
Yeah, which some of them had a fair crack at doing that, and we'll talk about that as well. But on Willem, I do, you just mentioning that reminded me, I can't remember what show it was. Again, I should note these things down when I'm watching, but sometimes I'm just kind of watching and seeing if I can glean it. Someone did say that...
Well, there's that many.
that is the thing. Yeah, it's hard. There's so many, and you can't even remember which network you're watching them on at times. But someone did mention, like, and for some reason, David King's voice is coming into my head, so maybe it was him, but like Willem Drew's role, I think it might have been actually on, it might have been on SEN, like on Fireball on Friday.
I think it was on Fireball, yeah.
Yeah, he was talking about like what, Willem Drew does need, even if he doesn't tag Merritt the whole time, he needs to have a focal point for his game, like a target for him to kind of, and then like, because he does build his game off of that. Like he can tag and still be more than a tagger in that sense, and everything's
because
tagging being back in vogue over the last year or so, and I don't think it ever left. It's just like people notice things more when they want to make an agenda out of it sometimes, I think, but it has been back, and I think he just didn't get that focal point like in his game, and for a team that needs, he's a player that will attribute himself very, very well to a role when he's given it, and like I'll never question Willem Drew's effort. He just seemed a bit lost on the night as well. Like he never ended up in, like, you're so used to seeing Willem Drew just popping up in areas for whether it be handball,
absolutely,
putting a tackle in, and just he kind of wasn't, just didn't notice him much. And
I mean, what were his tackle numbers like? I haven't actually looked. 4 equal top with 3 other players, but
so
just tackles as a whole were just not good enough.
Yeah, exactly. And again, that's what I think we're 18th in the league in tackles as well. So we're just not doing those things very well. which sometimes as a collective, if everyone's out of position, then it subdues the ability for if Willem Drew's chasing too much of the game because others are down, then he can't play his role well. So maybe he's a symptom of the game as well, similar to how we're talking about HORNE-FRANCIS. But Willem Drew is one of those players we trust to try to arrest some of that sometimes, and he couldn't do that either. So yeah, and maybe that was just that he just didn't get a defined role within the game, which
and we saw in 2022.
This was a team. Well, Essendon were a team that had a target. Like one player was the highest rated player in the league the week before, and was the one.
Well, and he worked his ass off, and like I know I've called for tags before, and then it's not exactly how it's played out, and then it's not necessarily how all AFL games are played. Even though I really want people to be blanketed. But
we all just think about the 2004 grand final and Kane Corns, which is like, it's so easy to do. Like, let's just do that.
We want that. I mean, to be fair to Willem, he's done plenty of jobs before, and that's why we have so much confidence in him. But what I was going to say is, I think it was back in 2022. I think at times when Travis Boak perhaps was out through injury or whatnot, we actually saw games where Willem actually found a lot of the ball because he was given a different role. It just makes me wonder, and Connor Rosie's performance over the night on Thursday makes me wonder if perhaps Rosie, off the back of last year, which he probably would have liked to perform a little bit better as a whole, even though we're big advocates for how his game was last year as a whole. Perhaps Connor's probably trying to bite off more than he can chew, and that's what eventually gassed him on Thursday night. I don't know. This is all just speculation. And then as a result, not entrusting a guy like Willem Drew to take on a bit of a higher responsibility in terms of the not stat padding, but the more getting the ball and using it rather than the negating that he does well. I guess what we're just trying to come to is what we said in the initial point, is that he just seemed a bit lost. And then you got Jackson Mead, who I thought performed okay. Still good in traffic, in stages.
He's not the one that isn't trying. Like if everyone else above him, like the Willem Drews, the Connor Rosies, the Jason HORNE-FRANCIS, are all down, Jackson Mead isn't the player that's going to, be like, grab your knives, like, I'll lead the charge. Like, it's just not.
No, he's a role player, and that's okay. I think we said that last year.
And maybe he will have a game like that where he just breaks out and leads the charge, but I don't see that within him, nor is that the expectation of him. He's meant to be kind of like the cherry on top of their performances, and then you have Jackson Mead's talents around that to kind of add to that rather than try to make up for them being down. So if they're down, like what the hell is Jackson Mead meant to do? And that, again, he's a young player, and hopefully that'll develop, but we don't see him as a high-end All-Australian talent. As much as we love him, it's just not where his role is. So those are the guys that are meant to be doing that stuff, and they didn't. So, yeah.
Yeah, exactly. And Boakey, when he overperformed versus Collingwood, and Daniel Gorringes of the world are saying, like, he should be your best performer. Like, he should be getting you 15. This was more of one of those games for Boakey. Although it seems like he was trying hard, it was just down on the first 2 weeks. Like it's where he probably should be.
Yeah.
But you know what I'm trying to say. Like, everyone else is that much lower, and then he doesn't. He's going to have his ups and downs, and then he performs how we should be expecting him to. But no one just wanted to put their hand up. Maybe apart from other Whites, from a midfield point of view, of course. It's just and the only guy that did was in his second game of football.
It's a good segue, because I was about to say there's 3 guys I want to just talk about, and they run through the middle a little bit. And obviously the first name that comes to mind is Christian Moraes in his second game. Maybe some people have said, like, I think Alessiani put on Twitter, like, and this isn't like giving him shit. It was funny. Like when was Harvey Langford the name of the Melbourne player that got the Rising Star nom this week, I think?
I think so, yeah.
And like Alessiani goes, oh, what does Moraes do? Play croquet or something like that? To be fair, I watched, not having watched the Melbourne game, but seeing the highlights, I thought Langford was a worthy recipient of the nomination. Murray's maybe guilty of playing in such a horrible game to watch that it was. He did have some highlight moments, so it would have been very. And he keeps going the way he's going. He's going to get it in the next few weeks. Though he should never he's a young player, very raw. Probably come into the side sooner than most expected. So don't expect that from Murray's every week. He's going to have his moments. The game is tough for him, and that's how players learn, is they have the tough games and learn from them. But for him, one of our best performances on the night. Really impressed with his intent and effort and his disposal again. He was. It's probably part of the indictment on the others and some of the poor ground ball and everything that was going on with some of the players. As Christian Moraes is in his second game and looking very, very clean in both his gathering and his disposal of the ball and his handling of it. Great for him.
Second efforts as well.
Yeah, exactly. I don't know if there's anything you want to say. I'm sure we're talking about. I think he's probably going to come up later. Again, teasing forward a little. There's not too many people that were putting their two hands up for votes, and Moraes was one of them. So,
I obviously echo those sentiments. He displayed
maturity beyond his years in both footy games and age.
For the people who do pay a lot of attention to the under 16s and the under 18s competitions and stuff like that pre-draft, it's a glimpse into what they were kind of expecting him at his best to perform. But to see it in his second game was just totally out of the box and not something that I certainly expected, although his debut was fantastic. But I'm sure he'll come up again. So save some of the statistical markers for that point in time. But really impressive. And like you said, young people can fluctuate, but if he continues on this kind of level, then he'll have a Rising Star nomination under his belt. Sooner rather than later.
Another one that isn't going to, I don't think, will feature in the votes, but at least on my end, already teasing forward. But I liked some of the things he was doing. Just came off a little bit wrong at times, but it's fine margins. Joe Berry, I thought his running, particularly his second quarter, I think it was, that just he really tried to influence the game. Had a good run and carry. Had a couple balls down the line that went out and floated out in the full that you could kind of just tell he's getting his radar, and he's still, for someone who is touted as a good kicker, and I think it's actually, we're seeing it, it's just he's just slightly off, so it's just he's missing, and he missed a kick into Soldo in the goal square, although if it was a more athletic I think it would have probably hit, if it was Todd Marshall or obviously Mitch as well. I think one of them gets to it. It's just Soldo moves like a fucking
or with a bit more confidence, he takes that extra 10 meters and goes.
That's the other thing. I think he could have gone for goal as well on the run, and he missed a set shot or two again.
Another set shot.
I know.
Yeah.
We were talking last week. He's got his goal. He's got the monkey off the back.
I know. I was thinking that the whole time, and he was actually my spotlight for this week because
good stuff.
In comparison to the first couple of rounds, I thought this was the game for me that showed what his potential is in terms of a hard-working, high half forward that's going to absolutely burn you on the way back. He also had a moment where he crumbed a contest on the half-back line and just jet streamed towards the corridor. And that's a little Zach Butters kind of Robbie Gray notes that he modelled his game off, as he has the Robbie Gray side of things that he mentioned pre-draft. He kind of modelled his game on, and because in the first couple of rounds for me, and he had a lot of people pumping him up for his preseason, but the first couple of games, I just think he came in and then came out of the game very quickly as a young forward pocket player. But this was a bit different in my opinion. He had a lot of chances to impact, like you mentioned, and just that extra bit of experience and confidence to add the polish would have found us in much better positions on the field, but score-wise as well, for those reasons that you mentioned, whether it be kicking it out in the full, going forward, or not summing up that Soldo, do I kick to Soldo, do I kick for goal kind of scenario in his mind. But for me, this was a game that he showed a lot more, and it's exciting. Again, young players, like you mentioned, go up and down, but for every game that he plays, if he just smacks on that extra layer of confidence, which then turns out to be another layer of polish to his disposal, by the end of the season, that's going to be a really exciting prospect to look forward to. And then obviously for the years to come after that.
Yeah. Yeah. No, I echo all of that. He's, yeah, like I said, it was like a lot of things, like objectively, you might look and go, oh, I was out in the full and missed that kick and missed a goal. Like, what are you talking about? It's just like you look at the in between the lines of that, and it's like he was involved. He was much more involved in that second quarter. When
talking about effort, yeah,
because there's a lot. We were looking for a lot of the leaders to stand up in that second quarter, and they didn't. But the likes of Moraes and Berry, and the other one I want to mention, maybe not quite as high, but his intent and effort was good. Still was Joe Richards again, and it's like the recruits coming in are kind of were some of the cleanest and most adaptable to the conditions, which was again is the indictment on the senior heads. It's like it was. You can't blame the conditions when the younger, more inexperienced players, or even though Joe Richards, I know he's a mature age recruit, but he's still young in as far as football experience goes at the top level. All these guys looked a lot more comfortable with what was going on, despite the fact it was a shit game. They were the ones really trying to make things happen, and the intent was there as well. So yeah, shout out to all those three. I think it was a really it was one of the few. Again, there's some obviously the game in its entirety was a fucking shit show and horrible result and all those things. But those players and as what you mentioned about Berry and then Moraes as well. Moraes, I forgot to mention back before, and maybe now we'll get into the defensive lines and I can backpedal a little bit. My watch list was going to be HORNE-FRANCIS. We've already talked about him, so I'm not going to go back to that. And again, not concerned with the future. It's just like the next 2 to 3 weeks, my watch is on him to see how he responds to both the media scrutiny that's coming with it, as well as just the fact that he within himself will know that his game's been a bit down. Not the game itself and the intent, maybe not down, but just the output has been down. And how do I internalize all that's going on and make sure, like, because he knows that he's close. It's just like, how do I get that? Like, because that's what the great players do. They find how to get to where they want to be, and we know that HORNE-FRANCIS has all those abilities and has shown that already. So that's where my watch is
how
on.
Does he climax?
Yeah. It's going to be the second time I've used vinegar strokes in the mood board.
It was ringing in my ears, but I didn't want to say it again.
Yeah, no, it's going to be used now.
You're sick.
Yeah. Dances with taco. But my spotlight to go now, and if you're happy to move to the defense.
Yep, certainly am.
Really pleased with actually a lot of efforts in defense, despite the game that it ended up being. Because I think they were playing alone. A lot of them were playing a bit of a lone.
Oh, they had a lot to do.
Exactly.
They had a lot to do.
I mean, before I get to that, let's just mention the stats as far as the forward 50 entries go. 59 inside 50s for Essendon versus 44 for us. So +4 in Essendon's. I mean, it's a short season so far, but +4 in their average and we're below ours. So, and it just speaks to the territorial aspect of the game and where the game was played. It's Aliir. I think it's just, again, that's my spotlight. It's not like a great Aliir game. He's not in all Australian form or anything like that, but I think he is playing a lone hand.
I thought it was a sneaky great Aliir game.
Yes, I think he's playing
like exactly what you're saying. Yeah, like it wasn't a dominant, just like steam train Aliir game, but it was a sneaky great game considering the match situation and a lot of those scenarios. So I'll let you get back on with your spiel, but yeah, I agree.
Yeah, no, that was about it, because his stats will come up a bit later, but I think he just he's been dealt a hard hand already because of the fact that we've got, and a shout out, by the way, to Radaglia coming in, who, again, like he's
100%.
sometimes
Yep.
looks like a little bit of a gazelle out there at times, like learning to, but he had some good spoils and moments. So I think Aaliyah played better because he had a bit, like at least knew that there was another body there to do some
Another
work.
charge. Yeah,
Yeah, like whether or not you trust Sava overall as far as what he can do long term, I think he played okay in his first game back.
I thought like Asava was my backup spotlight.
Oh, nice. I like
I
that.
thought
I thought about it.
I thought for a guy in his
just
first game back into like for the season, I thought the thing, and it's probably a criticism that I had on a few occasions last year, was he kept it quite simple.
Mhm.
If he had a short option, he took it. And that short option was typically a ball user like a Farrell or a Logan Evans or someone of the like. He gave it to him. If that didn't call for it, he went long down the line to a contest on the wing, which is a common piece of play. Yeah. But a lot of his groundwork and second efforts on the ground, like there was a few goal-saving efforts that he put his body on the line for as well. Like he obviously gets a bum rap, but in conjunction with what you're saying, and considering that Zerk Thatcher is still like at least a month and a half away, we need Asava in from a structural point of view, and I don't think he did anything to let himself down in that regard. Like I said, I thought he kept his game quite simple. There was one or maybe two occasions where I think he went for the mark instead of an opportunity to spoil. But in saying that, yeah, on the high majority of occasions, the decisions that he made, I thought were right for the situation that he found himself in. Him and Draper were kind of exchanging pushes in the back. For the first, what was it, the first half? There was like two one way and then one the other, or something like that. Needs to fix that up a little bit. But again,
where the Radaglia criticisms came out is like he doesn't have, and maybe this is just because Radaglia is too much of an honest player that he just doesn't have the ability to sell like a
dark arts
in the back, because he kind of just like it just was very obvious that there was a free kick there.
Because Evans got caught a few times.
Yeah.
Similarly, again in the first quarter, got done with the push in the back against Nate Caddy, and I don't think it was fucking there.
They were umpiring it very much in that vein. Like you kind of quickly figured out that's the kind of game it was going to be, unfortunately.
Yeah, for a nudge in the side. So yeah.
Numbers wise, he had 8 marks. He had 8 1%ers as well, which was by far led our team. Aaliyah being second,
going at 83% as well. Disposal efficiency. So again, and I think it is 90%. Sorry, what was that?
To your point, kept it simple. He played his role, which allowed Aaliyah to play his role, which again, it's speaking of one stat, but Aaliyah had 11 intercepts, which is by far led the team as well. And Aaliyah was able to play his role more because he kind of, you'd have to ask Aaliyah and give him some truth serum. How much do you trust Radaglia in this game? But like, he at least seemed to show that he trusted that there was someone back there to play a bit more of like that, that second tool kind of second key defense.
Well, yeah, because when Draper was resting, it was Radaglia who was playing on Draper. So, yeah, there's obviously an element of trust, like their teammates at the end of the day. But he spent 90% of the time on ground as well, Sav. So, albeit a backup spotlight, I managed to get 2 spotlights here today. But yeah, honestly, on the night and then rewatching it earlier today, I just if that's what we get as a baseline, I'm happy with that. Obviously, we don't want to concede too many goals.
So, like we got to,
absolutely. Because
I think is a decent level to be at for him. I think.
Just structurally, it's so important, and we are suffering a bit of structural challenge at the moment. So
it helped.
First game back,
it helped it not be worse than it was, and that's a plus point for Radaglia, because that game could have been worse than it was. As scrappy as it was, Essendon had a few chances they fluffed as well, partly because of some of our defenders having some decent efforts. So,
fair enough. let's go through the whole defensive line. Nah.
Yeah.
Those are,
And
it's
yeah,
the
but
hot, yeah, they had a lot of work to do.
they did. Yeah. I mean, I don't have too many issues with any of them down there, to be honest. I thought Bergman was decent. You know, Bergman was back there as well. I think they all played it.
Yeah.
Probably Logan Evans, maybe the one that's a little bit still struggling, trying to find his feet this year. But I think overall as a unit, they were.
I just don't think he found the ball enough.
Yeah.
Because when he had it, he used it at 80%. And so that's 80% of 10 disposals. So, and one out of those two ineffective disposals, unfortunately, ended up in a goal against. He bit off a couple of delicate kicks as well that, like, across the ground, that really showed like what he could offer moving forward in years and experience. Just some of those kicks into the center or across the body, so to speak, and something that we actually stopped doing, which was noted in commentary later into that fourth quarter. We did just become very predictable and stopped biting off some of those kicks into the middle that were going to get us back into the game.
It was 12 minutes.
Take it.
I've actually got it as a note in my live notes that I'm taking. David King with 12 minutes, 45 seconds to go is what I've got on my notes, said playing a fraction safe. Like, we shouldn't be having that as a note with 12 minutes to go in a game that we're not in a position to win it. We're at that point, the leader was gone, essentially. So we shouldn't have been, like, there was no benefit to playing the way we were. We'd already found out what was going to happen because Essendon started moving and making inroads into our lead and had taken it away at that point. So why were we still playing that way? It's just like it's damage limitation whilst also
there's no Charlie.
Well, yeah, it was just like devoid of ideas, which is a concern.
It did seem like that a bit, which is an indictment on everyone, even some of those defensive players who had a good game. Just everyone. Just went into their shells in an aspect.
Fitness was at, and that
lost the dare.
Yeah, I wonder what was going on the bench, like how players coming off and speaking to the conditions and what the coaches knew on the bench as to how much run we had. It would be interesting to kind of get that inner sanctum look. We will hear that, but it was a concerning kind of finish to the game in that sense. And
and it was a bit like, because of this is just a query on the fact that we're adjusting to a new game plan. It perhaps kind of felt like in those latter stages when it did get a bit tighter and there was a bit more on the line with every possession, they go, well, typically we've done this thing, but do we still stick with the thing that we're trying to bed down? And that's not an excuse. They need to practice those match scenarios and actually decide, like, in this scenario, are we still going to try and do the thing that we're trying to do for the majority of the game, or do we change it to suit the situation? And I think we found ourselves in a couple of minds in those situations. We didn't adjust to the match situation at the time, and we just reverted. Well, we didn't revert back. We just played it safe, like you said, and we became very predictable. And Essendon fed off of that, and their crowd buoyed them along the way.
Yeah. Funny. Before we'll get into the segments in a moment, but interesting crowd game. There's obviously been a lot made of the Ben Mackay Bronx cheers, and I would agree with those sentiments in general. Like, you should probably back up your players a little bit more than that, and but a fun crowd in the sense of, like, just the noise that comes when Sam Draper just slowly turns. Like, he's kind of like, there's a little bit of a performative aspect to how Draper,
it's pantomime.
It's really. I kind of, like, despite the game being shit, I kind of just had that, like, I don't know if it was the way the microphones were set up at the ground, and I just noticed the crowd reactions to more subtle moments in the game more, which, like, adds to my viewing experience as a watcher, even though it was a shit game. Just some of those little moments. Again, the Mackay one is a negative, but some of the fun of the crowd getting around Draper, going around the corner, even though he's directly in front, more or less, was really interesting. Did he had a drop punt set shot from the boundary that missed, didn't he? So I think he's like,
whether he'll tell you that he was going for goal or centering it, yeah, leave that up to him. But yeah, he was kind of forced to go the drop punt from that far out. Yeah.
Yeah. No, it is interesting though. And it's it's a discussion for another day. Just the modern goal kicking techniques and what some players are starting to do. I certainly love that Mitch Georgiades can just do a drop punt from wherever. And although on the night missed a couple, like you can trust him to get pretty close to the mark most times. Did you have any? I don't know if there's anything else in general with the game. I mean, actually, just one thing I wanted to say. The over handball is just like the one extra handball all night was just doing what we were hospital handballing so much. Not like as a general note, game awareness was piss poor. That's one note I had. I just scrolled back up to my notes, and that's one thing I wanted to make mention of before we get into our segments and whatnot. Our game awareness was just piss poor on the night, and it's been a little bit poor in these kind of games. As last year, I had it as a note at times, and certainly against Collingwood. Richmond is hard to get a gauge on because the game went our way pretty easily. But in games where it's tight, a game awareness and just understanding, like there's just so many times, like I think it might have been Farrell got caught holding the ball at one. But there's a few times Rosie's been caught holding the ball.
It was like on the precipice of holding the ball. I think he still technically got the disposal away, but he got spilt out to an Essendon player who took it the other way.
And whereas he should have, if he'd known, and whether it's a player calling out, it's always a thing when you're growing up playing footy. It's like, give your teammate a shout, like, let him know.
Yeah.
And we just didn't have any of that. And there was like handballing into trap. Like there's so many times where rather than earlier in the chain of possession, there's a chance to kick because a player was open, but then they go one or two more handballs, and by then Essendon have closed in because you haven't actually moved the ball much. Like the handballing, I understand the idea behind handballing, but you have to understand the situation. There's
an end point where you've
got to go like handball,
you clear
kick,
space.
Handball. Like there's a chain, and it's never going to be the same. Football is a chaotic sport, as you kind of opened up the episode talking a little bit about the chaos of it, but there is understanding of when the pressure is going to come. If you do just kind of handball around in one spot, the opposition's going to close in, and it happened so many times in the night because Essendon's pressure was really good. The contested numbers and all that stuff speaks to it. That was my one main note to finish on. Was just a lot of, I think I actually said it on the night. There's just so much fucking stupidity. I think I tweeted like rank stupidity in this game. Like it was just, it was unforgivable kind of dumbassery on the field and just constant from everyone. So it was like, I don't know what they've gone into the game thinking was going to happen. But again, to go back to the World War II analogy, it was just like, no one thought about the actual situation you're going into, and you've gone in and just realized like, oh, I should have brought fucking like long pants because it's going to fucking snow in Russia. Like, just fucking be smarter. Like, it was just, it was very, very.
Yeah. In any game of AFL football that you watch over even the last fucking 20 years, you see teams and they over handball it, and it does not get you out of trouble. Like, it gets you into more trouble. Like, someone has to release.
The Wolves closed in very quickly with pressure.
Yeah. Particularly nowadays, let alone yesteryear. I totally agree. And again, it's something that we were wary of coming into the season, with that game plan being the game plan that we want to go with. And it does seem like the wider competition as a whole is trending that way. You just got to do it well. Your Giants and Hawthorns of the competition doing at the moment.
Yeah, no, absolutely. Alrighty, ready to get into segments?
Let's do it.
Down, Gray doing brilliantly, getting through to Monfries. That's Grady's best.
Wilson kicks hard and kicks cruelly.
Alrighty, yes, it is the Wilson Gray Award. And this week, again, it sucks coming off into losses, like talking about losses and talking about this. But there is always a few moments in the games. And this one did have a few. I think I texted you early in the game saying, like, I've got a few.
You did,
At that point, I was like, we're going to win this eventually. But still, we've got him. Jamie, you get to go first with this one with the Wilson Gray this week. What do you got for us?
Oh, low-hanging fruit at its finest. Like, because I go because I go first, you have to go the Specky.
Menzies argues, Wine kicks and Georgiani's flies. He's having a big night, couple of goals, set up the boat goal and now marking on the wing.
Yeah, we actually haven't seen a George Specky in a little while since he came back from his ACL. I think it may actually be the first genuine.
A couple of times.
He has.
Yeah.
He definitely has. But I think this is the first genuine Specky that he's performed since coming back from his ACL. So, yeah, possession is 9/10 of the law, and because I go first, I feel obliged to nominate that one.
No, I love that one, and that was certainly in my shortlist as well. But I do have
great
one
thing, by the way. Yeah.
Oh yeah,
Let Robbie entertain you. Had to be in the Sting. Had to be in the Sting.
It's very hard. Like it's one of those things. And to those listening, like the Stings are gonna I'm gonna slowly improve them. But I just had to. It's the first time having Stings in there. And I hit them live rather than post them in. So Jamie heard that live as well, and his first time hearing the Stings I've got.
I wanted it to be a surprise.
Yeah, but the Michael Wilson one I found that'll be the one. Like I've actually got a mission to go. Like, because I'm going to start going through watching some older games. I'm picking up DVDs and stuff on eBay and stuff of different games, and I want to find some like Michael Wilson because Robbie Gray highlights are much more fresher to us, and there's a lot of them in the last 10 years that are very easily and readily available on YouTube. Lots of good commentary moments, like we just heard, but. Michael Wilson.
I remember.
So I need to go.
Yeah, I remember looking back on the 04 season and that highlights series of the minor round. Pretty sure there was definitely some. We're pretty sure there was definitely as an oxymoron for one, but yeah. I'm fairly certain that Michael Wilson had some memorable moments throughout that year.
Yeah, it's finding the ones that have the commentary to go with it. So
yeah, absolutely.
Things will adjust as they go, but I've got at least something in there now for the show. So, so my Wilson Gray nomination for this week is Joe Richards. He had this little moment towards the end of the first quarter where he did a little gathered
shake and bake, baby.
Yeah, he did the shake and bake.
There's under pressure again. Richards takes his time, did well. Rosie backs himself to get out of trouble. Back to Richards. Got foot shuffle. He outspun Hobbs in the end and did brilliantly and worked it to half forward.
It was fantastic. And so he does a little bit of one and handballs to Rosie, and then Rosie kind of gets caught in traffic and handballs it back.
Gives it back.
Yeah, he does he just absolutely cooks Ben. I think it was Ben Hobbs. Because he does a little dance in front of him, and he's got Joe Richards has shown in the last few weeks already that he's got the fast feet that he can just keep, and his team awareness is so on point that he's got the fast feet and he can keep a player kind of at bay just simply through movement, and then he shimmies one way and then Hobbs cheats too far that way, and then Richards goes past him on the outer and just in a brilliant little move. So. I love that, and I had that down straight away. And obviously, the Mitch mark, I was like, "Well, that's going to be the first on the list now." But as I was going second, I was pretty comfortable with.
The Richards shake and bake was definitely on my short list. It was definitely up for contention.
I'm not sure if the camera would have caught it because obviously with our Zoom call, it just like camera goes to the speaker. But as I was talking about it, Jamie was doing a little fist pump as I started mentioning it, so I knew straight away that I was talking about.
For sure.
Yeah. No, two good ones. I think the Mitch one obviously will get a lot. I think might get the share of the votes just simply through the fact of what it was. But I'm hoping a few out there will appreciate the little Richard shake and bake. And I know certainly Jamie does as well.
I certainly did. Yeah, for sure.
All righty, let's move on to our goal of the week.
Monfrez has kicked a goal. Unbelievable. Haven't seen anything like that. It's gone at right angle.
Flashpoint. Stevie Modloff. What a time! Oh! He is floating on air now.
All righty, goal of the week. Unfortunately, again,
memorable moments there.
Oh yeah, no, it's a little bit of fun looking for him, and it's I could make stings 3 minutes long, but I need them to be 15 to 20 seconds. So I kind of want to get all the let the commentary of the moment go through properly. So those two are good ones. Goal of the week, and I get to go first on this one. Actually, a couple of good ones this week, despite the game was. I'm going with and the finish might be relatively simple, but the JHF last quarter goal.
About 2 hours before he should have been warming up today. I believe they had a golf day the other day and he was there 2 hours before. Look at HORNE-FRANCIS, grab that and run to an open goal.
He picks him up, and once he gets that ball, there's no way you're catching him. The composure puts it through. Down to you, Mitch.
Tom Edwards, the second gamer subbed out for the Bombers. The first gamer Saad Al-Houli into the game.
With the gather to score, and the finish is actually tough. It's still tough on the run. He kind of shapes it into that far post. Yeah. Just the moment it was, it felt like that it was the one that was going to break. Unfortunately, we know now it didn't break the back of Essendon, but it was a stand-up moment for Jason Horne-Francis, who we've given our fair share of criticism to in this episode, but also can see that he's just so close to probably breaking out and actually being the player that, again, this year that we expect. So, and yeah, a great finish and a pure moment of magic to gather that ball. It's how he particularly the game it was, the hand, like being able to one hand just take that one was just like, that's what surprised me more than anything, is like the game had beaten me down into submission with all the fucking shit like handling of the ball, and then Francis just reaches out with a mitt and kind of just gets it on a string, and then obviously
he'd done it. He did it in the third quarter where Durham was about to take possession and he's ripped it out of his claws, and I think he had a shot on goal in that instance too. And then I think you'll notice that I think Durham and I can't remember the other player were also involved in that goal as well, and you could just see Durham's face like, oh fuck, not again, because he actually goaled that time too, so it just adds to it on replay.
Yeah, no, it was a great finish. Again, it's like one of those ones running directly at goal, but it's still like a tough finish, I think, for any player to run it, how he gathered it and the situation of the game it was. But just the full play was just a beautiful goal, and JHF is my nomination for this week.
Yeah, no, obviously, would have been my first selection as well. So, honourable mention to Ollie Wines midway through the third quarter, kind of just faked out the Essendon player, a bit of a shake and bake move and kicked his. But I'm going to go DBJ's goal later in the third quarter with a couple of minutes to go on the clock.
Georgiades was a difficult one to handle. Soldo just gives a little space to Burne-Jones, who gets onto that right boot. Oh, he's kicked the goal. He has kicked the goal. Ivan was a part of it all.
He's opposed to Ridley, and he just read the fall of the ball quicker, and Ridley sat off and he laid off, and Burne-Jones has gone bang, going to make you pay. And in the context of the game, that is
just in tight against the goal line and the forward pocket boundary, just weaves in and snaps it on the boot to get us a goal, and to take us from what was about 3 points back out to 9 or whatever the margin was at that point in time. But just getting that extra buffer, which we thought if we start the fourth quarter well, we'll break their back a little bit. A little highlight. Credit to DBJ, by the way. We haven't really spoken about him. Yeah. Again, our best champion data rated player too. Yeah. So on the night, some more good forward entries and disposal on his behalf. So just a small little shout out to DBJ. I think someone on radio mentioned that every preseason Port fans kind of go, oh, well, he's going to lose his place now. And he's just lifted again in some regards. So credit to him.
Yeah, he's not one that we're looking at as like in danger of losing his spot. Like he's a plus point to what we're doing and our game plan. Like he's one of the few that seems to kind of understand his role to a plumb and efforted on the night too. He certainly didn't let his colours down. So shout out to him. It sucks that he didn't get a mention at all yet, but I guess that's probably also a plus point to him because the mentions in a game like this usually go to a little bit more of a negative sense. So
negative slant, yeah.
No, but shout out DBJ. Yeah, champion data. Top rated player, which is funny because I don't know what your votes are yet, but I know he's not in mine, which is just shows it's funny how he was in consideration and certainly an honourable mention. But let's get into the player of the year votes. Now it's time for the CREEDCAST player of the year voting. It's so fucking dumb.
No. Love it. Yeah.
Yeah, that was
Harkening back to yesteryear. I mean, wartime kind of theme
yeah,
for
true.
the opening of the episode. Yeah, it's got that radio announcer vibe to it. So I hope the listeners and viewers enjoyed that because I know I did.
My voice breaks in there. It's just like I'm clearly not a trained voice actor, but yeah, no, I went with that. I was just like I needed to do something. I was like I don't know what exactly to go with. It's like didn't want to like individual any player, and then I just found the old news timing thing, and I was just like I could do something funny here, and then yeah, embarrass myself for the internet. So you're welcome, everyone.
Yeah, leave us a comment about the things. Tell us what you think. Constructively, of course.
Yeah. We don't get paid for this, and I do this in my spare time. So, and it took a time, but yeah, you certainly feel free to give me shit about my voice breaking because I'm a 37-year-old man. I swear. Anyway, votes. You get to go first this week. It's going to be an interesting one. If we Yahtzee, I would be very surprised, but I know that we've done it a couple times before, so we'll see.
Yeah, definitely. And sometimes, well, I didn't expect to, but honorable mention goes to George. I wanted to get him in the votes, but yeah, it started like a house on fire, as we mentioned, and unfortunately fell out of the game, so couldn't really justify it in the end. My one vote goes to Alir for the reasons we mentioned before, just imperious down back, I thought, spoiling, intercept marking, 15 disposals, 11 of them were intercepts, going at 80%, 8 marks, which I think you mentioned before, 5 of which were intercept marks, 5 rebound 50s, 5 1%ers. So yeah, a good Alir game, sneaky great game, as I mentioned before.
Yeah.
My number 2 is Miles Bergman. Definitely, I think in a lot of people's eyes up in our maybe 1, 2, 3 best players on the night. He had the 26 disposals, 8 of which were intercepts. He had 575 meters gain, 10 marks, 19 pressure acts, 14 of those were in the defensive half, as you would expect. It was just his disposal, and I think he went in the 60s for disposal efficiency, and he also had 6 turnovers. So that kind of knocked him down a few times. I thought he had a great night defensively. It's just more on the offensive part of things that kind of knocked him down a couple of pegs, but still in my best players on the night. 3 votes goes to Ollie Wines. Like I mentioned before, he's probably one of the only ones in the midfield from a senior point of view that can hold his head up high. He had the 31 disposals, 11 of which were contested. He had 9 ground ball gets, which we touched on earlier, which was leading the team, 350 meters gain. He kicked that goal, 9 score involvements, 5 clearances, 4 inside 50s. My second best on ground with the 4 votes is Christian Moraes, who we talked about earlier. Just a fantastic all-round game. 27 disposals, 85% disposal efficiency. I think he spent 84% time on ground as well, which for a winger who was playing both an attacking wing and a defending wing at certain stages of the game was amazing. And paired up against Xavier Dersma, who I think a lot of Nuffies post-match were saying like, oh yeah, Dersma had a great game, but he's playing essentially against a second gamer. So I thought chocolates were divided equally there on a tangent, but 7 marks.
Just 1 second. Like, I'm glad for Dersma to be having a good game. Wish him all the best. Like, good to see. I'm glad. It's pissed off at Caffin against us, but
yeah,
it's nothing against our play. Like, we're actually decently situated with players that can play those roles. I think so. Yeah.
Well, and yeah, I mentioned in last week's preview that I'm happy to have him back if Essendon keep going down a downward slope and they never pick their shit up. So yeah, but I know. I was absolutely hoping that he didn't kick the goal because an arrow would have just gone straight through my heart, and so he didn't, which was fortunate.
The commentator said,
emotions.
The arrow, and
no, it's like the opposite to more.
Yeah.
But yeah, back to Moraes, 7 marks. He had 2 goal assists included in his 5 score involvements, 4 inside 50s and 4 rebound 50s, which kind of indicates his work up and down the ground. Best on ground. Jace Burgoyne. What a start to the season that he's having. And also, while being swung between wing, 1 week and half back this week. 27 disposals, 8 of which were intercepts, 5 ground ball gets, which, yeah, is up there in our top bracket. 96% disposal efficiency, just over 400 meters gained, 10 marks, 3 of which were intercepts, 6 score involvements, 4 rebound 50s. But I think one extra bit on top of all of that is he had 100% time on ground off the back of, I believe, 100% time on ground against Richmond as well. So he's played 2 full games. I'm not sure. I didn't look at the Collingwood game. I would imagine it would be up in the upper echelons of time on ground percentage. So to play 2 full games, with this being a 5-day break as well, just indicates how his fitness is, playing a halfback and a wing role.
Game.
Yeah. I just think that's amazing that in 2 games he hasn't had one spell, even for 30 seconds on the bench, and he's still put up those numbers. Looked assured by hand, by foot, going back into a contest, taking those intercept marks that I mentioned. Just another step in his evolution that I think we maybe touched on in our preseason shows, but just something, again, just going back that we were hoping for. Then he bedded down a position last year and went to another level, and he's done no wrong, in my opinion, to start this season off.
Yeah, no, I absolutely agree. We talked about a lot last year, like the amount of disposals you have, like the more you have, the more impressive that disposal efficiency gets. So to go at 96% when you've had 27 disposals in that position and in a game that was not going very well for us in handling the ball or anything like that is just a really incredible result. So yeah, no, definitely echo your thoughts. And we didn't Yahtzee as far as positioning, but as far as players go, we have the same 5. So I won't go over that. You've talked about the stats well enough there. So I'll just mention what my votes were. I had Wines in the 1 spot, and there's no real reasoning as to where they ended up. I actually deliberated a lot. I had him up in 3 at one point, and then I'll get to the rest of the votes. So I had 2 with Aaliyah. Again, like as you said, sneaky great Aaliyah game. Just unfortunately was the detriment came from a lot of everything that was going on around him. You couldn't talk about a heroic Aaliyah game because we lost the game, and ultimately, it's kind of like goalkeepers that have great games in soccer and then lose 1-0 because they've let one through at the end. It's just like you've had a great game, but unfortunately the result went against.
Sorry.
Yeah. I had Bergman in the 3 spot. All your point. The one thing that I had him lower and I bumped him up because he looked like he'd done his hamstring at one point in the game.
Yeah, that's a good point.
Got strapped up, looked a bit tight. I'm assuming it was a corky or something like that, or of that nature, because he hasn't shown up in the injury report at all, which we'll talk about.
Yeah, and it got strapped up, but he
looked sore, and there was moments at the end of the game where he's putting in efforts, and then he's really like, you can see he's kind of a bit stiff and sore, but he's still putting in the effort, which I just appreciated. It wasn't the perfect Miles Bergman game, and ultimately it kind of, everything kind of went to shit as far as the game goes for the team, but I think he held his head high, and considering the conjecture around his future, it's not like he's playing, safe as far as his future contracts are concerned. He's really putting his body on the line for Port Adelaide, which I appreciate. So
yeah, I'd agree with that.
My 4 and 5 votes are exactly the same as yours. Murray's that kind of effort most days for a second game. I might have even snuck over the line for the top spot, but you can't go past that Jace Burgoyne stat line you've just put forward, and for a relatively young player in Jace Burgoyne's case as well, you've got that's an incredible effort, and he started the year like a house on fire. It's a really interesting leaderboard so far. I'm going to start putting them up this week now. I'll update it. I'll have a visual. You can look at the top 10 on Patreon for the Patreon members. Without knowing it off the top of my head just now with the votes, I'm just looking at this week's votes. I don't have them all collated in front of me. You've got like guys like Jason Horne-Francis, who I think maybe only have 1 or 2 votes from. I haven't given him a vote this year, I don't think. Rosie's got.
I had him for Collingwood. I know that.
I don't think he's gotten a vote.
I don't think it was high up though.
Yeah, Rosie's gotten best on ground the first 2 weeks. Obviously, he hasn't featured at all this week. Butter's not even there yet, so it's a real interesting leaderboard to start the season with. And Burgoyne's featured there fairly well the last couple of weeks. So it's going to be an interesting leaderboard to start the year, and then it'll be interesting to see how like some of the usual suspects, like Butters won it last year. Horne-Francis closed in late to make it a tight second, and Rosie and Wines are up there. So Yeah, these kind of games are the ones I would have liked to have seen a Willem Drew pop up as well. But yeah, interesting leaderboard to start with, especially with the guys like Murray's getting in there early as well. So yeah, looking forward to continuing to see how that shakes out because there's some interesting names popping up. Alrighty, let's get to previewing this week's game, which is St Kilda at. I'm padding because I'm scrolling down. I had an extensive list of stats that I'm scrolling down to get to. St Kilda this week at obviously at home at Adelaide Oval, a nice little 2:50 on Sunday afternoon kickoff. Looking like cloudy with the chance of a little bit of rain, but nothing too much around. Just a nice kind of, I guess, autumn game. Is it daylight savings start this week? Or daylight savings ends?
That's a great point. Yeah, I think it's usually the first weekend in April. So
we're getting an extra hour of sleep going into the game. So there's that. But yeah, interesting game coming up because St Kilda are looking in decent form. First thing to talk about, though, is obviously the Guernsey that's in your background, and I've got it hanging in my background. I've got the Nike one, the old Nike one hanging there. The Macron one's actually up in the corner there. It's just slightly out of vision. But yeah, throwback Guernsey game. There's a little bit of celebration around that, but it is an intriguing contest coming up before we get to looking at the lines. St Kilda, and even more intriguing being that we smashed him in preseason. There was a lot of talk around that and how that looked for both us and St Kilda and what to take out of that. And when you look at where we are now with St Kilda's last 2 weeks and our last 2 weeks, we've both faced the same opposition the last 2 weeks. Their win when we beat Richmond was against Geelong, which was really impressive. Then they went and beat Richmond the week after we beat them, but they beat them by more. It's a really intriguing setup coming in because St Kilda are the team that probably we're favoured on Sportsbet. I think $1.50 versus $2.50, but it's a lot shorter odds than maybe you would have expected a month ago when we smashed them in preseason.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, you can't get any more bruise-free than that preseason game on their behalf. And then to their credit, they've started the season relatively well. Obviously, shocking Geelong at Marvel, which I think they've actually won their last 4 against Geelong at Marvel. So is it a shock? Yes, it is because everyone expects Geelong just to win it all the time. And then everyone playing Richmond, you're like, apart from Carlton, you're like, how much can you take out of it? And St Kilda beat them by a margin that we probably should have won by, but didn't get that far off of in the end. I guess at the end of the day, they've got a head of steam. We've got to respond. And our last several encounters against St Kilda have been close encounters. So tantalising to say the least. We need to respond. After the Collingwood game, I said we're a good responding team, which we are. It'll continue the yo-yo if we get up. I don't want the whole season to be a yo-yo season, much like I can't imagine you would or anyone listening or viewing would want to do. But they're a bit of an enigma for mine just because of what we typically think about a St Kilda side versus pre-season versus the last couple of weeks in their regard. Don't know what to make of them, really. I do know that they've got some damaging players.
Yes, yeah. Maybe that's we can maybe start there if you want to start with the St Kilda backline, since I think that's kind of where some of the damage comes from for me. Because it's just lines. We'll talk about the injury list for both teams maybe at the back end, but we can talk about what we think we'll see. I mean, there's a lot said about Nasiah Wanganeen-Milera as far as his future is concerned. And, I'm more than happy to see a guy with the last name Wanganeen in our team again. It's particularly a bloke with that kind of disposal and speed and game intelligence. He's certainly one of them. Like he and kind of Sinclair coming through off the back line through the middle are just a really 2 key damaging players. And considering what we're struggling with at the moment as far as transition and that's kind of where a lot of my fear comes from is what they can do rebounding from us struggling to get it in forward, and then if we turn it over and on our half forward line with the kind of players that can go back the other way, Yeah, there's a bit of concern there with their back line. Not so much if they gets in. I think we showed in preseason again, like who knows what to, I don't think you can make too much of that, to be honest. But yeah, I think we can, if we can actually get some territorial dominance and build up around the half forward, then we can kill some down. Like, it's not a defense that scares me a whole lot as far as if they can defend us if we do get the territorial dominance. But if we do have a similar game to last week, then that's that rebound off of their halfback that's going to be really, really damaging to a side that is playing the way we are at the moment.
Their attacking prowess is one thing, but they've also got Callum Wilkie, who's an All-Australian in his own right, and his time has usually been spent trying to keep a Charlie Dixon quiet. So much like our issues as we found against Essendon as the game wore on, if George is getting a blanket, who's going to step up? And are we going to make a change at the selection table? Can't imagine Soldo gets another go, unfortunately for him.
Yeah. Well, that might be an interesting time to bring it up, since we're going to talk about our forward line in conjunction with their back line. Ollie Lord is a test, and I think if he's fit to go, you've got to kind of break that glass this week, I think.
There comes a point in time with some players where, yeah, you're right, you just have to play them.
Yeah. If he's fit, of course, it's a test on a shoulder.
If he's fit, of course. Yeah. Because he's shown that he's clearly shown that Brisbane qualifying final is definitely he's still got a few tickets left of that. It still gets brought up across the AFL landscape. Don't know how much longer he can kind of live off of that one game. Apart from that, though, he shows the fight that you want, the contest, the aggression, but we just don't really know what he is going to be, apart from the fact that he's a tall presence, which we sorely need. Now, if he's not fit, I think we have to just do what we wanted to do. And again, I don't think Finlayson had a great game last week, but we need the senior body, in my opinion. We need the forward craft and the crafty nature around the ground, back up ruck duties that we know he can do, and contribute as a midfielder when substituting for ruck. I think for me, we need to give George some more aerial assistance, even though, again, we're going away from a bomber into the forward line. That doesn't matter. We still need some aerial assistance and still need to get out for those occasions where you do need to bomb it in. Because
give the defense a reason to be accountable. And like we said last,
that was exactly, you just took the words right out of my mouth. That was the next point I was going to make. We can't just make it easy for them to, it will just end up in that ping pong style of game. And they've got a forward line, not jumping to the forward line, but just from a ping pong point of view, they've got a forward line that's kind of making do at the moment. So if we do end up in that backwards and forwards game, they may make us pay, and our turnovers are fucking atrocious, to be honest, or scores from turnover. So just going back to their defensive line, our forward line, again, a little bit might be determined by the midfield mix-up, which we'll chat about next, but hopefully Willie, I appreciate his efforts, particularly against Richmond. They didn't really come to the fore against Essendon in the midfield, but he's a goal kicker and he keeps small defenders accountable. So this is the structural thing that I guess some of the people on Facebook that you mentioned earlier, that's kind of where they're coming from. And I can see that point of view. Like, we just, before it's too late, we need to get our structure into something that resembles a fucking professional AFL football side, because it is just a bit all over the shop at the moment. We're making do, granted, and the 23 that are selected need to perform to AFL standard, which we've both just discussed. They didn't as a collective against Essendon, but we need structure, in my opinion. Any good AFL side needs structure, and that forward line, we can't just expect Mitch Georgiadis to do it all, because he can't, quite simply. He can't do it all.
We saw that firsthand last weekend, or last Thursday.
Yeah. He can start well. He can put us ahead early, but AFL teams, especially one coached by Ross Lyon, are going to figure out a defensive strategy to negate that. It's as simple as that. We need more options.
And last year, as good as we were, both games against St Kilda, home and away, were both battles because of it was a Ross Lyon coach team, and he figured out a way to like bring it down to his level. And with how we're playing, and there's even more concern with kind of that, and again with the forward line, we need to have more options and dynamism. Yeah, you mentioned Finlayson last week. The game, I went down to the Sandford game down at Alberton on Friday night. It's hard to get a big read on because obviously Glenelg coming in as defending champions of the Sandford and they're playing, and they're a big bodied, they're a mature SNFL side built to play the SNFL competition versus our side that's built to be a reserve side for our AFL side. So there's a lot of territorial.
Well, the injury issues do filter down
in
that regard as well.
That's exactly right as well. A great point to bring up. So we kind of battled well in the first half, but Glenelg slowly eked away, and in the second half was just kind of a procession for Glenelg after that. I think it was 40 or 50
It's not good
points.
enough.
Yeah.
We didn't even kick a goal, did we, in the second half?
I don't recall. Yeah, I will admit, I don't leave games early, but I had work on Saturday and seeing what I needed to see, and just I left halfway through the last quarter. I think a couple of Glenelg fans in front of me that were just annoying me, and I was just like, oh, I've got to go. Beyond that, Finlayson kind of was there. It's hard to get a read on his performance in that game because it's like the team was inundated by playing against a better side. So, he's fit and available, and I think he's a senior player as well. So you've kind of if it's not going to be Lord or Whitlock battled well considering the team, and he's still a project player. So I don't think he's up for. I know a few people have already brought him up, and that's again like you just debut him because you're running out of options. That's the only. But
I think at round 4, like I don't think we're there yet.
No, that's yeah. But that could be a consideration for.
There are scenarios, in football seasons where you do just go. And I even saw comments after the Essendon game like, play the kids, when in actual fact, I think a third of our side were under 23 or whatever. You can't just put there's plenty of example, West Coast being one in recent years. You can't just have a whole team of juniors playing AFL football. We need structure. We need senior leadership on field. Look, if Finlayson is being held out for not disciplinary reasons, but as a kind of standard setting exercise, and there's a cultural aspect to it, then I understand that. You need to set a standard as a club. People need to meet those standards and need to behave in the right way. And in that regard, if that's the case, then look, that's disappointing. I'm not going to assume it though. Assuming that Soldo does get dropped, like I think he should. To be frank.
I don't think that should be even up for discussion. Like if Soldo makes the side this week, I think that would be.
Yeah, look, and to be fair, like Rowan Marshall is fantastic ruckman. If my memory serves me right, though, Sweet performed quite handsomely last year against him.
Yeah. Yes.
Apart from the moments where Rowan Marshall floated forward, which with, a Radicalea back in the side can kind of level that out a little bit. So, look, as I was saying, Finlayson, if it's not for standard setting and cultural reasons, then he's definitely got to come into consideration. But like you said, if Lord is fit, there comes a time we need to see what he is. I think he needs a genuine run at the top level, just so we know what we got. I mean, he's extended his contract. He's been around long enough. The injury to him last year really set him back. Last year would have been a perfect apprenticeship as Dixon was going out for Lord to come in and then and get this season off in a much better light. But life doesn't always go the way you plan it, and
Mm-hmm.
there's not much you can do about that injury. But we still, in my opinion, we need to see what we're going to get out of him.
And if
he needs to have the confidence as well that we back him, and that he can provide a contest up forward.
Yeah, because if he's fit, and with the injury crisis we have, if he's not selected now, then it's just to me that's the side saying you're not in our future plans, and then I wouldn't, because there's no we're in a break glass for emergency situation in our forward line right now as far as big bodies go. We got a real shot to what that looks like we tried Soldo as a second ruck / extra body up forward last week, and it was quite horrible, and by the end, like it was clearly failing towards the end of the second quarter. We'd seen enough.
Funnily enough, it was in the preseason game that we also trialed a 2-ruck system. We commented that it actually looked quite good. I think there's been other comments around the place the last couple of days. I don't think this is going to reflect that, though, if 2 rucks was selected again.
Yeah, I think it was on the couch last night. I had Lee Matthews on it, and they kind of asked him, like, what have you seen from the season so far? Is this like, I think Lee Matthews' comment was just like, just how useless February footy is. Like, he just kind of just said,
"Oh, you're speaking my language."
You don't get anything out of it. Yeah, exactly. You don't get anything. He's just like, there's nothing. You don't get anything out of it. Like, it's just So, that data we have from that preseason game, and I think it even came up when selection came through last week. Someone commented, have they played a game together like Sweet and Soldo? I was like, the only one I can even think of is preseason, and it's just in any game when the heat was on, it didn't look good, and we need someone that can actually is a forward and battle, and as while Lord's had his injuries, his body is still younger and fresher than Soldo's, who's just looks beat up and slow at the moment. Whereas Lord is a bigger body, a more talented forward, we think already. And we need to. I hope he's fit for this week, because I think he needs to get selected if he is. And I've got that little bit of hope now from the injury report, which may be a good way to segue into
the hope that kills you.
A good way to segue into the midfield, which I actually don't have, like, my hope isn't with, obviously the big news is Zach Butters is suddenly a test and got through train. I think it was Josh Money reported that he got through training.
Yeah, it's been a few sources. Yeah.
It's the talk was started maybe Friday last week, actually. I think even just in the immediate aftermath of our game against Essendon, it started being a talk from, I can't remember, it might have been Tom Morris or one of those names in the Melbourne media started talking about the sneaky chances for Butters to be fit for St Kilda. And then today it came out that he got through the full session and looks good. Do you think that, like, now I am very, very wary and PTSD from the Connor Rozee situation last year. How are you feeling about the chances of him coming back? Because I'm like, if he's fit for this week, do we try to go another week and give him another week and then have him go for gather round? Or do you just go, if he's passing all the metrics, do you just go put him in for this week? Because, I mean, he's going to help a midfield that is down at the moment. As much as the pieces shouldn't be down, they are down at the moment. So
again, it's that structural piece. It allows JHF more freedom to go up forward as well, and add a bit more fear factor in that regard. I'd listened to Ken's press conference from earlier today, and I think he pretty much summed it up. If Zach's fit, he plays, and that's pretty much where it's at. I don't think they'll make that mistake like they did last year with Connor. Like, it would be one of the biggest about faces to do that. I mean, you never really know, though. Like, shit happens.
Two different injuries, to be fair, too. We're talking a soft tissue versus a knee, right? So
a knee knock or something. Yeah,
bone bruising. It's just like a clean out more than anything. So it's not a overall structural or major muscle injury. So
and look, I'm no physician, so I don't really
know.
But
purely from MD Dave that knows shit. So
well, just from what everyone else typically talks about. To not dance around the topic, if he's fit, like you said, if he's passing all the metrics that he needs to, then he plays.
Mhm.
Like, he's not coming back from the nerve damage that cast him out a few years ago or anything like that, where you really do need to proceed with caution. It's a typical AFL injury that you return from. If he's not fit or if there are any doubts, then he doesn't get picked, and I'm comfortable with that too. I'm comfortable with the midfield that we have without him. They just need to fucking lift, and they need to use the ball well, and they need to tackle the opposition fucking players. We've got enough talent. We've got enough depth in that line to cover him. But yeah, if he's fit, that would greatly help our cause. Absolutely. And then it gives him that one game before we come up against Hawthorn in Gather Round, where we need all hands on deck by the looks of things at the moment with how good they're playing.
Yeah, no, absolutely. That is looming large. And we want to get to that game, 2-2. Like, that's neat.
Yeah, and I was really hoping GWS would get over the line so Hawthorn have their loss like last round. So now I don't know who Hawthorn come up against this round, but I'm hoping that they win just so that they're not coming off of a loss against us. And I'd really like to come up against, I'd really like to stop coming up against sides who get their names dragged through the mud through football media the week before we play them. That'd be nice.
Yeah. No, we've had that 2 out of 3 weeks, haven't we? And then we had the complete opposite side of the spectrum with Richmond. It's been an odd.
Yeah, it was a block out of Port discussion.
Yeah, it's been every team we've played has been on one end of the spectrum, like extreme ends of the spectrum. As far as like otherwise in the midfield, like it's interesting looking at they've got so many players that like Jack Still's a test.
Yes.
I think he was named in the emergencies last week, but he's a test. Overall they've got some good run through there. I mean, Hugo Garcia is a young, raw player, but got some just in the little bits of I've seen from him. He's going to be one of those players that makes some mistakes, but like they've got some good talent running through there. On paper, I go like our midfield is better, but we saw last week the results of what you do when you don't put the intent in, and I think what we've seen from St Kilda the last couple of weeks is a lot more hunt and intent than we've shown so far. So there's an equaliser there, and we're going to have to lift a lot to get to, because they've built some confidence and they've at least there's some synergy and understanding what they're doing coming from the back line through the middle that we don't have at the moment in inconsistency. And I think it's going to be a good battle for us, a lot more than I would have thought a few weeks ago when we were talking about, if we'd been talking about this a few weeks ago, I was like, chalk this up as a win again. But it was a little bit more concerned for me now based on how they've kind of brought them, even guys like Zach Jones are playing some of the best footy he's played in years. Like, I don't worry about
if he is in good form. For me, with Zach Jones, I always just think he's not far away from bad performance.
Yeah. That kind of shows where they're at, though, is like Zach Jones is kind of like,
he's even,
a rising tide lifts all ships, right? Like, it's just like he's.
Exactly. 100%. Yeah. And that's what our midfield needs to do. It needs to rise that fucking tide.
Yeah.
One thing I would also say is they've got a Jack McRae who kind of seems like he wants to prove a point to the competition. I still think Jack McRae, by and large, is an accumulator. But he, if you listen to SEN and was it Matt, that guy that calls in to take on Kane on Monday File? He tried again yesterday.
Oh, did he?
He did, yeah, he did. He called up again and he got cut off again.
But he started talking about fantasy numbers again?
Fantasy? You're talking about practice? Fantasy? Jack McRae, look, I think objectively, he is having more output than the stereotypical Jack McRae Western Bulldogs game, but I still do think that he is an accumulator, and the damage
game once they've paid. Like, what is he? He just played his 250th or whatever, wasn't it? Like, was he one of the?
Yeah, in the first game for St Kilda,
that post where like the Office meme where he's like,
Michael Scott with the mullet. I think we were talking about Willem Drew having a defined role. surely it's whether Jack Sinclair or Jack McRae are getting off the chain is where his focus will be.
And I think Sinclair's the more damaging player, I think.
Yeah, and he's a lot more comfortable in their system, I would imagine. He's an All-Australian. Marcus Winhager on their side of things, he'd probably be doing a job on a Rosie or it'd be tough to do it on Butters first game in, but that's the type of player that Butters is. You'd probably want to kill his confidence early if he does play. But Winhager is who I would assume they would have pegged to do a job on one of our more elite midfielders. As a whole, I guess the Butters question is what's going to be lingering on everyone's minds until selection comes through and how that shapes up. Again, if he's not picked, they all just need a lift, and I think they can all still do the job. Yeah.
Again, on paper, I'm confident. Based on data, I'm a little bit less, but I think they're going to get there's going to be a fair bit of pressure on us again this week, and we've seen it. How other teams have responded to playing us with that pressure on. So hopefully we can have a little bit of that bump this week with the midfield group, who probably have copped a lot of that heat, and understandably so. Defensively, I'm probably, again, it's the weird thing that's come out of this game last week. That's where one of the areas I've been really concerned about throughout the preseason with the injuries and whatnot, but having seen Asava come back, Elia playing well, obviously seeing Myers Bergman not turn up in the injury report at all, because I was really concerned about that throughout that game once he went off and got strapped up. I think their ball movement coming in, if we can't, again, it's just going to be a game of how long, if they get some good movement coming in and win the territory battle, then it's going to be a concern for our defense just getting overwhelmed eventually. But if we can match it in the midfield and make it, help them out, I think we're a lot more sound to handle. They've got some, Machito Owens is a really talented, mercurial kind of player.
Yeah.
Obviously, Hill, there's no, you don't need to say it. They've got some talent down there, but and certainly,
they got some plucky, small to mid-sized forwards. Yeah,
and I think Dan Butler's a test this week as well.
He's a test. Yeah,
there's a lot of tests this week with them.
There is, Philippou is still a long way out. Who can do some damage on the scoreboard.
Mm-hmm.
But they've, Higgins, Owens, like you mentioned, Caminiti is a role player, but he seems to just pop up all the time. Who was it? Oh, Mason Wood, of course. Bradley Hill, Cooper Sharman also pops up. Some of the Caminiti and Sharman aren't top of everyone's list and top of everyone's mind, but
it always feels
they just seem to play their role.
Yeah, against St Kilda, we always have there's one of these kind of guys that we don't work. I think that COVID year game where they beat us at Adelaide Oval was was it Butler and I can't. It was a couple of guys that got off the chain.
They had a stupidly accurate game that night,
and I remember or something like that. Yeah,
I was there.
I was there as well. Yeah, up in the upper reaches of the western stand, but eastern stand. But it was when I remember going to the pub later on back when I got back to the Barossa and just obviously turned up in my Port gear steel and a bunch of cricket dickheads that support other teams going bad kicking's bad footy. I'm like, well, fucking insanely accurate kicking doesn't happen that often either. But it's just what you got to deal with.
True.
It was
and remember how shit, I think that was fairly early in the season too. Well, the delayed season. And remember how shit we're all feeling then.
Yes, yeah.
Just to feel shit in the preliminary final, losing by
at least it was it was a battle of a prelim. I still fucking anytime insufficient intent comes up and the discussion about it comes up, I think about that prelim. Anyway, I feel with Asava getting through the game unscathed and looking good. Elia, we've just talked about in the review, is in Elia form. While it's not all Australian form, it's the kind of form we can hope for out of him in the defensive system. It is, and Bergman and I think we've got a reasonable backline considering the injuries and concerns we had. It's not obviously I prefer a better there's list management things to happen in the future to improve it, but where we're at now, I'm okay with what we've got going into this game.
Yeah, I think one thing out of like our old game plan was with the high press, we were susceptible to some entries forward for the opposition, that is. And now with the kind of just the nature in which we're turning the ball over at the moment, the defense has had to be used to soaking up pressure for a long time now. So nothing's really changed in their regard. They're just like, oh, for fuck's sake, it's left to us again.
Yeah.
We're the other guys. But yeah. So that's exactly right. To echo your thoughts, that was the best line on the field in my opinion against Essendon, and so I really trust them to cope with their whatever opposition they're lined up against more often than not. It's just it's just the weight of numbers is the issue.
If we can match it in midfield, match it at least or exceed what St Kilda are doing, because we didn't match it all last week, and yeah, if Rosie gets back to what Rosie did in the first couple of weeks, HORNE-FRANCIS improves on what he's put out the last couple of weeks. Again, not saying he's been bad. He's just, we want to see HORNE-FRANCIS in the best players again. Those two improve, then that's going to improve. That's going to lift the midfield, and in turn will help out the defense. And I'm just really intrigued. It's going to be a really, really intriguing squad show this week whenever it comes to it, because selection again this week is going to be really interesting. They're looking like they're going to bring in Alex Tauru as well, like one of the tools that they drafted last year. That's looking likely. I think when I was on their website looking at their injury report, that was an article they put up that he's available. So kind of can just read tea leaves and go, if they're doing an article about the kid, he's probably going to be selected, you'd think. So so they've got some interesting selection, obviously, with all the tests. Just to run through it quickly, they've got their injury list was Jimmy Webster, ankle test, Liam Stocker, concussion test, Dan Butler, Achilles test, Jack Steele, knee test, and Max Heath, ankle test. So there's so many and a lot of names.
And I mean, the people that we want to come back in are all tests as well.
Yeah, Zach Butters.
So I'm sure, whoever's doing the St Kilda fan podcast is going, they got Lord test, Butters test. So yeah,
Hockey Jones test as well, which is an interesting.
Of course. Yeah, we didn't even bring him up. But again, if he's fit, he would come straight back in purely from how he performed on versus Richmond, I think.
And I think we need to be working on him we want him to be a core part of our future. So he needs to be playing, unless he just drops off form massively, which again, we talked about, he's sometimes susceptible to a bit of scapegoating. There's some reasons to that, but there's it still goes over it's mountain out of molehill stuff. There's constructive criticism and there's stupidity. Lockie Jones criticism sometimes is an interesting factor in that spectrum. So it's three very interesting tests on our side, and Butters, Lord, and Jones, and then obviously they've got a fair few there as well. So it's really hard to read what the squad show is going to be. It's going to be an interesting squad show this week because there's so many moving parts on both sides as we preview it at this point. So I'm looking forward to that. Have anything I guess to close off, I always sometimes forget to do this, but to prediction wise, where are you at? If again, it's the Essendon game last week, we were both 5 to 6 goals. I think I was 34 points was what I said, and you said 35 goals. So I'll ask you first and I'll put my prediction out after, but where are you at, all things going how you hope they do?
Rebound win, but it's going to be a butt clencher. Ringhole's going to be
squeaky bum time.
Couple of goals. Yeah, squeaky bum time. Much like recent matches against St Kilda. But we need to respond. It's at home. Some key-ins look likely without putting the mocker on it. With a bit better structure, our apparent need to respond to a loss. Going to be a scrap, I would imagine. Couple of goals. Couple of goals, mate.
There's my old mate Shay in America that knows no fucking idea about Australian football. He'd be like, a couple of skippity doos. I'm probably I have this thing that when you pick that one game in your AFL tips every week, that you pick the margin. If it's one that I'm thinking is going to be close, I'll just pick 21 automatically for some reason, because that's just where I go, and it often actually ends up pretty close. So I'm just going to go 21. I think it'll be close, but I think we can just sneak away by a few goals. And if it can be one of those games where it's we get out to a nice lead and they sneak a couple back late, but we win by 21, that would probably be the most comfortable scenario for me. Don't think that's.
I think a similar thing happened last year. We got out to a comfortable lead, and then they got a couple of GPs late.
Yeah. No, hopefully it's one of those where we're just far enough ahead that it never actually gets to a squeaky bum time. But yeah, I wouldn't be surprised if we end up in that situation. So
yeah. I mean, and I don't go away from what I said in the preseason. Like, the early season wins, you just got to bank them however you can, because no one is the finished product. No club is the finished product at this point in the season. No matter how good Hawthorn look right now, no matter how bad some other teams look, such as ourselves, hopefully, we need a bigger sample size. So everyone's sorting shit out that they've practiced over the preseason. We just got to bank them wherever we can, particularly at home.
In a rebuild kind of phase as well. Yeah, you've got to.
And we predict, like you mentioned, we predicted to lose to Collingwood, beat Richmond, but also beat Essendon. So now we're one back from where we predicted we would be at this point in time. So yeah, we just need to bank the win against St Kilda however we can. Just as a side note, just as a little interest, we mentioned pre-recording about a certain Twitter user, James Ives, who's a bit of a statistical buff. But basically, it's also in conjunction, Champion Data, Daniel Hoyne, he's dumped on Essendon plenty of times last year about the score from turnover differential being basically the be-all and end-all for your premiership hopes. 18 of the last 19 premiers have ranked in the top 3 for scores from turnover differential. So that's how much you score from turnover versus how much you concede from turnover. And basically, we're in no man's land. It's a very small sample size, but just even coming off the back of last season, I think we ended the season mid-table in that regard. And it's no surprise that we didn't end up, A, making the grand final, and B, winning a premiership. So, we're equal 8th for attacking, like scores for from turnover, but we're 15th from scores against at the moment. So obvious, and it's obvious. I mean, it's been a theme of the Collingwood loss and like our 2 losses so far. Turning it over in critical spots on the ground just has to subside. We have to get better at that facet of the game, and therefore we need to punish teams better as well.
That's a little bit of just that footy intelligence and smarts versus the dumbness that I was talking about earlier. It's just like there's a lot of intangibles and very nuanced stuff in footy, but a lot of it just comes down to how switched on you are on game day. And that's a lot of that. It was like we saw the worst of that last week, so hopefully everyone kind of gets that little, kick up the backside this week to be better about that, and then in turn, help those metrics that you were just mentioning. Because, footy is a very simple game when you boil it down to it. There's a lot of complexities that go into why it ends up being the game it is. But what you actually do and your intent and purpose on the day helps out a lot of those things if you can get it right. And all the talent that you have is part of it as well. But there's a lot of. We've let ourselves down in a lot of those departments over the last couple of weeks where we could have been better regardless of the injury troubles and other things that we find ourselves in. We can be a lot better than what we've been, and can be better in those key metrics. Just come down to just better decisions and better, better disposal and all those things comes down to it.
Yeah, they all contribute. That this is kind of the end piece. Like what's the score sheet saying from turnover? And it'll be a good watch. Obviously, it's only 3 rounds into the season to get this sample size from. But it'll be an interesting watch to see how we adapt and hopefully improve our net score differential from turnover, because 18 of the last 19 premiers is a pretty good indicator on how much this facet of the game affects your fortunes. And I mean, I've I've said that I don't expect a premiership this year. I don't see even our best 2022, 23 being a premiership winning side, but we need to be maximising each season as best as we can. And we want to see us play good football at the end of the day.
Yeah.
And this goes a long way to doing that.
Yeah, you could, never know. Could Stephen Bradbury your way through to a fucking you just at least play the best football that you can and just see where it ends up at. That's what I want to see. Like, if we
absolutely, that's sport.
Yeah, because we'll at least get a better idea of where we need to go from this year. Whereas if we just flail away and don't do things right, and it puts you in no man's land. Whereas we just need to get an idea of where we're at, leading into Josh Carr taking over and go from there. So, a great way to finish up and kind of, I love the stats nerd stuff, because that's really, because a lot of people look at footy in just a very, binary way, but it's just like, you look at all those, like you bringing up like 18 out of 19 premiers, like that's a very, very, very strong statistical backbone to that idea that, and it's a very simple thing. It's a turnover differential, but it is. But that comes down to just execution and how switched on you are on the day a lot. And then it comes down to talent and your game plan as well. But a lot of every team is objectively a professional football team trying to do the same thing. So it'll come.
More so than ever.
Yeah, exactly. It's as even as it's ever been. So I love that. A great way to finish up. I think that about wraps it up. I've enjoyed tonight. It is one of those things that, like, you lose games like that and it's fucking horrible, but I'm glad that I can come on and talk to a friend about Port Adelaide sucking, and have have a good discussion about it. That makes me feel better, even if I've still got my concerns going forward. It's therapeutic. So, I really appreciate being able to have the discussion and appreciate the people that listen along for the ride. And hopefully it's similarly beneficial to you guys out there to kind of metabolize what's gone on in the last week.
Couldn't agree more, Dave. And happy to discuss it all with you. Happy to put it out on the airwaves for our listeners and happy viewers on YouTube. Thanks again for everyone. Obviously, follow, and subscribe. Give us the best rating you see fit. _the Creed on Twitter, _the Creed on Instagram. Get involved. Show us support wherever you can. Maybe even sign up to Patreon. But if you're an Apple user, do not use the app, because Apple, the con artists, will charge you an extra $5 on top of the standard fees. So a huge support. We appreciate everyone who supports either financially or otherwise. Obviously, this is about community building and an outlet of therapy as such. So just appreciate everyone involved and the kudos that we do get as a benefit of talking about Port Adelaide.
No, absolutely. Just a minor as well. It's not a minor note, but Trans Day visibility today as well. I'm wearing the trying to get it up on the Patreon, on the YouTube, on the Vision. But shout out to
AFLW season.
Yes, one of the best, one of my favorite shirts. Just a really nice shirt, the Pride shirt from Port Adelaide AFLW season last year. But shout out to the trans community, where, as you were just talking about community, where you and I are, I know it's an interesting space sometimes in footy and certainly the world currently, but we're as a podcast and as a community, as ourselves, we're a safe space for all footy fans, no matter your gender,
no matter your proclivities.
No matter your proclivities. I need to.
If you love Port, we love you. It's as simple as that.
Absolutely. If you're a good human being and you love Port Adelaide, then we're gonna get around you. So shout out to the community out there, and hopefully the day has been one that's reminded you of the good parts of the world rather than some of the darkness that exists out there at the moment. So shout out for the Trans Day of visibility, and other than that, I'm looking forward to, as much as it's been a hard week in the Port Adelaide world with the turgid game. It's my first time at Adelaide Oval this year for a Port game. Obviously, I missed the Richmond one, so I'm just looking forward to that. I haven't even actually talked about that, but I assume you're going, and I assume we'll probably see each other for a beer. So, looking forward to getting down there in person this week, and hopefully this time next week, where I've got a much more happier World War II analogy at the start, and we're 2-2. make a happy World War II analogy, but I'll try to make it happen as long as we're 2-2 next week. So, yeah, that's about it.
That's it.
Up the fucking cockle divers.
Yeah, bring the points home, boys.